It is now being recorded. I hope I don't have to say all the things I said just a moment ago. I won't be able to. Anyway, our WebEx facilitator is David Bowie. He'll introduce some of the speakers as they are as they come up for and express interest in making a public comment. Our webcaster is Alex Kretescu, and our backup and facilitator of all things that fall through any of the cracks or gaps for this meeting is Zach Richardson from the bar's executive office, kind of the right-hand person to me and the deputy chiefs in the front office. So I wanted to do those brief introductions. Now we'll go around the dais here and also on the WebEx to introduce the advisory group members, starting to my far right.
My name is Matt Cheney. I represent AAA Auto Repair Club of Northern California, Nevada, Utah, Mountain West Group. And I'm sitting in for Brian Pearson, who couldn't make it today.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Ruben Parra with California Automotive Teachers.
Jack Molodanoff on behalf of the California Auto Body Association.
Dave Robinette with ICAR, the Inter-Industry Conference on Auto Collision Repair.
I'm Dave Kusa, Automotive Service Councils of California.
I'm Bud Rice with the California Automotive Business Coalition.
Lou Anapolsky, Knox Lemon and Anapolsky. I represent various ARDs around the state.
Good morning, Tess Dubois Carey, Universal Technical Institute.
Jeff Cox, Automotive Maintenance and Repair Association.
Anthony Bento, California New Car Dealers Association.
And we'll go to the WebEx. Introductions. Megan is there, I believe.
Yes, I am. Good morning, Megan McKernan, Automobile Club of Southern California.
And is Gary there?
Good morning, Gary Conover, representing the California Automotive Wholesalers Association.
All right. Any other advisory group members? Joanna?
Patrick Hayes, Sarah and Taylor at the Personal Insurance Federation.
All right. I see little boxes, but I can't make out the faces. Just, oh, I do now. I have to look at the screen to my right here. And is Joanna there? Okay, we were told that Joanna Johnson would be sitting in as the designated alternate for, where is he? I'm looking for him. Matthew Webb with the Preventative Automotive Maintenance Association, formerly the Oil Change Association. We'll introduce her at the appropriate time. All right, but one last set of introductions. Thank you for all the advisory group members for doing that for the audience. And then let's see, advisory group members, deputy chiefs. If you could stand up, I will introduce each of you. There's three. We're Bill Thomas with the Field Operations and Enforcement Division in the front here. Behind him, kind of, is Linda Jansen, Linda Jansen with our Administration, Consumer Services and Licensing Division. And Clay Leak with the Smog Check and Information Services or Technology Programs and that division. Thank you for being here, each of you. I think that's it for introductions. Oh, I did want to make Linda's giving me the reminder. Sorry about that. I did want to let all of you know we had a recent vacancy that came up. Vincent Soma, who previously oversaw our licensing programs and other operations, took another position with another agency, let's say, in state government. And we recently backfilled that position with Michael Villarreal. So this is your point person for all things trouble spots that you experience with our licensing program. If there are any issues, you need something. Hopefully, you've gotten if there's a licensing transition from an owner to a new owner, hopefully that's done timely. But if there is something that comes up and we need to push it through or expedite it, we will do our best to accommodate, and Michael Villarreal can be your point person for that. Please try not to use that on a regular basis, but because they don't want to create too much havoc for his folks. But we do try to accommodate when we run up, when there's a transitional issue or other problem that is occurring, and we want to make sure we are providing some customer service there to get it done timely. Let's see. Let's go forward with the agenda. Are there any announcements or questions before we move forward? All right, seeing none, we will proceed with the agenda. Legislation and regulations update, our standing update on everything we are monitoring legislatively speaking, and regulation packages that we're working on. We have our team, Holly O'Connor and Kayla Shelton from our executive office, who are here to provide the presentation. At least I think they are. They haven't stepped forward yet. Oh, here they are. Phew. I was like, oh, okay. I thought maybe they were attending virtually. That would have been a surprise to me. Welcome, Holly. Welcome, Kayla. We have a lot of regulations that are moving along, so very excited to share those with you all. Morning.
Good morning. We can't see the slides, but okay, I have them.
Oh, yeah, the screen that's usually here is rolled up into the ceiling. I think we're gonna try to fix that. Yeah, be sort of a challenge. You'll have to turn around to give the presentation.
That's okay. We have the slides. I have them printed just
Do
in
you?
case.
Okay. You can just say next slide to Zach or Alex too.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Holly again. Nice to see you all. First of all, we do try to have the most current information on the slides. However, everything may not reflect the latest updates. And websites for that most current information are available on our slides and on our webpage. Starting with the important legislative dates, on January 1st, the 2023 statutes took effect. Legislature reconvened on January 3rd. January 31st is the last day for each house to pass bills introduced in 2023. And February 16th is the last day for bills to be introduced. Next slide, please. These are the list of the 2023 chaptered bills that we were tracking. Automobile dismantlers, our bar sunset review bill, 2 VIN marking bills, and the Open Meeting Act.
Next slide. Good morning, everyone. I am Kayla Shelton. I would like to start by reviewing the pending regulation packages that we do have in the pipeline. As you are aware, we are working on the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program package. We are working on a new teardown disclosure requirements for automotive repair dealers package. The smog check inspection equipment and station requirements package is moving right along. As well as the Consumer Assistant Program incentive increases package. That package is also moving along as well, and we will go into further details about where those packages are at. So the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program package you guys are all aware of. This is the package that will sunset the current brake and lamp program and reinstate a new Vehicle Safety Systems program. It sets all the regulations and the requirements for those inspections. At this point, it is actually being reviewed by OAL. We have requested that that this package does take effect upon approval with OAL. And the OAL's review is set to be finished the first week of February. Next slide, please. So we are also working on the tear down disclosure requirements for ARDs. This package will add and amend some definitions relating to the disclosure requirements for ARDs. We're going to clarify the estimate work order requirements in the event that the work to be done requires a vehicle tear down. Additionally, we are going to require ARDs to include the payment amounts for third-party payers on the estimate. As Holly did state, we try to keep these as updated as possible, but sometimes there are some changes that take place from the posting of the presentation to when we actually give the presentation. So I would just like to note that we continue to work collaboratively with the working group, and we've added also that we have added language in that in the event that the ARD does not know the amount the third party payer will pay, that the ARD put a notification on the estimate so that the consumer is aware that they will be responsible for any additional payment outside of what the third party will pay. We have held one public workshop, and that was back in October. We are working to finalize the initial package. Once the package is done, it will go over to be reviewed by DCA. After DCA has reviewed it, it will then go to the Business and Consumer Services and Housing Agency for their approval.
Just want to jump in real quick and let folks know, thank you for the update on that, that we've also sat down recently with the California Department of Insurance. Had a really positive meeting. Bill and I did last week. Bill Thomas and I did, and had a chance to review a number of things, including this regulation package, to get their input.
Thank you. Holly, do you want to take this one?
The next one is our DAD specification update, which I think most of you are familiar with. But this package replaces the current OBD DAD specification with a more comprehensive and updated version. It allows the DAD to communicate with new vehicles that currently aren't supported by this current generation of DADs. This package is in the 45-day comment period right now, and that ends on March 5th. Next slide, please. The Consumer Assistance Program incentive increases. This package increases the Vehicle Retirement Program incentives and also the Repair Assistance Program contributions. And it allows the Bureau to increase those amounts every 3 years if there has been a 10% increase in the Consumer Price Index. This package also removes the eligibility restriction preventing motorists from participating in the Repair Assistance Program more than once, and it unincorporates the CAP application and lists those application requirements in the regulation. This, for the status, it has been updated as well. This has been filed with OAL, and the 45-day public comment period is going to begin tomorrow and run through March 12th. And that is all we have for our presentation today. Does anyone have questions?
I just wanted to point out, obviously, we didn't, at the time of posting, didn't have much or anything regarding any new legislation. I'm sure there was a lot last year, so maybe it's kind of a calm year since we had our sunset bill last year go through, and we took care of a lot of cleanup and other fixes to our statutes. Has anyone want to open it up? Is there anything we should be tracking, anything we should be putting on our next presentation in April before this group? Yes, Bud.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. So we've had a number of conversations. I was going to make a comment about the tear down disclosure requirements. And I heard you say that you had a conversation with the insurance group as well. As much as industry can try to sidestep problems and issues, we'd like to go there. One of the things appears to be storage fees and storage charges. I think it's important for customers to understand, by the way, our customer is the customer. And in some cases, it appears as though the insurance company is a third party that's getting inserted into this to some degree. And in many cases, the shops are not in communication with the insurance company. It's happening through our customer. And then the customer and the insurance group are going at it. And so it gets complicated. It gets complicated. Storage fees are one of the things that happens in that case. I'd like to figure out some method or way for the customer to understand that the clock is running and have the insurance company understands that the clock is running, because the shops being forced to hold and maintain safety for a vehicle under our care is expensive. It is expensive. So if there's some way to accommodate that, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. That was Bud Rice with the Cal ABC organization. And just a brief response to it. I really appreciate those comments. We'll be working. We haven't had a workshop yet, but we're working on putting together a workshop on some draft regulations dealing with storage fees. This will be independent of the tear down disclosure requirements regulation package. We thought about combining the two, but it just a little unwieldy, and we thought breaking the two packages apart and dealing with the issues separately would be. I know there's a lot of overlap, maybe, but we wanted to isolate these two issues and deal with them in separate packages. We also earlier this month released a Q&A that we had been working on. For those of you who haven't heard, a Q&A on storage related issues, fees and the like. And that's been out there for a couple weeks now. We've gotten a lot of hits on the website regarding the posting. We worked on it for several months. And AB 1263, our sunset bill, which was chaptered last year and took effect on January 1, gave us a new authority to draft regulations related to storage fees and issues, related issues. But I think we're going to take a pause on that. We want to see how the Q&A is working, what the response is to it. We have already modified it based on our conversation last week, Bill's, Thomas's, and my conversation with CDI, or California Department of Insurance. Got some very good feedback from them on the Q&A as well, not just the tear down disclosure requirements package. And we'll see how that's working, and how the two industries, the automotive repair and insurance industries, respond to the guidance that's provided in the Q&A. By no means do we feel like we got it 100% accurate. There might be some issues that come up. That's why I want it to sit for a little while before we convene a working group or a task force or a workshop, a public workshop, which I thought we'd do and race into that, starting with our newfound authority this year. But with the Q&A now being out there, I think we'll pause, see how people are responding to that, see if we're still coming into with conflicts that we're needing to resolve between the two industries and the consumer, and probably look to do a workshop in the spring. I'm just kind of roughly sketching out a time frame for that. But for anyone who was expecting that to happen right away, as I probably led people to believe, I'm rethinking some of that just based on the Q&A guidance that we put out and wanting people to respond to that and see how that's going. Any comments, questions? Yeah, Jack Molodonov.
Yeah, thank you for those comments, and I appreciate all the work that the BR has done with the guidance or frequently asked questions, or whatever you call it. I think it is important, and I'm glad that you're at least rolling that out, so to see what kind of feedback you get, what kind of complaints you get, see if things can be worked out with the guidance now, because I think that was part of this whole problem is putting out some clarity out there for not only the shops, the industry, but the insurance industry, as well as consumers. So, because you're dealing with, three parties, it is complicated. So really appreciate the good work on that. And we'll see where that goes. And I agree, there's, at this point, but there isn't a hurry right away with the regulations. It's something they're going to need to get done, but at least we need to get some input as we just roll things out. The other comment is there was a bill introduced that you may want to add to your list. It's AB 1901. It deals with total loss salvage vehicles and certificates. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. I saw that pop up the other day. Haven't fully analyzed it, but it's something that you may want to look at, especially that the BR is now involved with, combining the brake and lamp into the vehicle safety systems inspection program. Thank you.
Thank you. I should probably just leave this on full time. Thank you for announcing that bill to us. We'll put it on our list.
Yeah.
Our list of one right now. Any other bills? Any other comments regarding? Yes, Anthony Bento with the New Car Dealers Association. Yes.
Thank you, Pat. I just wanted to flag, there's another bill that relates to window tinting that is a little bit perhaps tangential to the purpose of the group here, but I believe that's SB 898. One to take a look at least.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've got it on my notes. Yes, Ruben Parra with California Automotive Teachers.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Just real quick, what is the set amount that they intend to increase every 3 years? Is there a set amount on that?
It's not a set amount. It's up to 10% based on the CPI for the past 3 years.
Up to 10%. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Yeah. Yes.
This may not be super relevant, but as you're working through the third party stuff with the insurance companies and warranties and stuff, we've had a couple recent things where we'll be working with an insurance company and they will actually use another party, so I guess a fourth party at this point, to negotiate the storage fees down. And they are calling and pointing out laws and different things that aren't always entirely accurate. These are based out of other states, not in California. Not sure if it's relevant or something you want to look into, but something that came across my desk this week, actually. So fresh in my mind.
Thank you. Bud Rice, LABC.
Just one more quick comment. The Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program. I've made it a habit of coming to most of these sessions, and I have to admit, sometimes I go away and I'm not quite clear myself as to what's going on. If that program was called the Lamp and Brake Inspection Program, that would be fairly clear as to what it is we're talking about. Okay, if you say Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program, it's not quite as clear. Okay, and I think sometimes people go away going, well, is it more than lamp and brake, or is it less, or is it we're going to start here and then add some more later, or what is this? And if you look across the nation, other states have different programs. They're named similar, but they are more encompassing. And in some cases, they're a regulatory process of inspecting vehicles on maybe even a yearly basis to make sure the brakes are good, the tires are good, the lights are good, and these things are good. And is the intent eventually having something more comprehensive? And this is just our starting off point, or is it really just a brake and lamp inspection program and we're just blending the two together? Thank you.
So at this point, what we are doing is we are absorbing the brake and lamp and making it more comprehensive for those vehicles that are total loss vehicles wanting to go back onto the roadways. At that point, that is what the program is encompassing. We have previously held workshops, and this is the package that we have on board, encompassing the lamp and brake and making it more comprehensive by inspecting additional safety systems. That's where we landed on the best of where we can start right now.
There's a 9 points, Matt. He'll talk a little bit about it later on in the presentation. Matthew Gibson from our executive office, but it's more than lamp and brake at this point. It's got a number of systems that we'll be checking for. We've got seat belts, windshields, tires and wheels, airbags. And then with the authority that we have now, as a result of legislation chaptered a couple of years ago, we do have the ability to add to the list. ADAS, for example, was always imagined that would be introduced. I think some folks would like us to do it sooner, meaning now. We're not there yet. We need to collect some data to see what and how an inspection, what to collect or what to test, and how to give guidance to the industry to perform those inspections. So when this program goes live, we'll be doing a dump of the vehicle computer to capture some of that data or information to be able to make a decision on moving forward with adding ADAS systems into the inspection. So it has room to grow, and it's more than lamp and brake at this point, which is why the name is a broader title, as you've pointed out. Other questions and comments? Anyone on the WebEx, our advisory group members who are listening in, any comments there about this presentation? All right, moderator, we shall open it up for public comment on this item, and that means anyone in the room or on the WebEx. Anyone in the room have a comment regarding the legislation and regulations update? How about our moderator, Mr. Bowie? Can we open it up for public comment on the WebEx?
We are taking public comment via WebEx. Please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users will need to dial *3 in order to raise a hand. And I see that we have mobile users. Be aware that you have 3 different screens and only one of them has a hand button. So you may need to hit the ellipses, the ... in order to find that hand button. And I believe one of our panelists did unmute and was going to say something. Want to give them an opportunity to unmute and say what they needed to say.
Sure.
All right. I'm not seeing any of our panelists unmute a second time. So we're going to go straight to the public, and we have a question from Christina. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Christina Kubran, 352 Innovation, and I wanted to comment about the vehicle safety process. I'm willing to follow up, so that'd be great, but I really think you guys should consider battery and control systems, especially thermal management control systems of the new electric vehicles, because it'll be a significant safety issue if those control systems don't work properly. There's been battery fraud that was noted in an article from Canada where he personally witnessed a Tesla come out of auction with sandbags where some of the battery modules were supposed to be and the software was wiped. So the good news is the OEMs are doing a phenomenal job of mitigating that risk, and it's just going to only improve. But I think from a safety standpoint, I think that would be really critical to put in the vehicle safety. So thank you so much for letting me give a talk, and let me know if you need any more information. I'm happy to follow up. Christina Kubran, 352 Innovation. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Appreciate that comment. That's an interesting proposition there. Our regulations, which have been have already gone through the public comment period after several workshops, I'll say 3 at least, are pending at the Office of Administrative Law. We're trying to get them adopted by the end of the year as the statute stated, but it took us more than a couple of years, just a little over a couple of years to get that done, probably inside of 2.5 years, which I dare say, I hate to say it, but that was kind of on a fast track. But there was a lot to that package and a lot of outreach and public involvement through the workshop process and other means that we took to make sure we captured everyone's interests and concerns about the moving forward with such a huge change to our current lamp and brake programs. Those regulations, as I said, are sitting at the Office of Administrative Law, targeted for an adoption date of February 13th, I believe, if we don't hear back from OAL. I suspect we'll probably hear something, and we'll probably have to make a minor tweak, a non-substantive tweak to some of the language. But we have asked for an effective date upon adoption, which is rarely used, but it is available to state agencies. Usually the adoption occurs and then the next calendar quarter of regulation takes effect. We want to move forward with rolling this out by accepting applications for the new licenses, both for the stations and the technicians who will be performing these inspections. So that will be the first step going forward. There's like a three-phased approach that we've developed. And so we want to get going sooner than later in rolling this out. And that's why we didn't want to wait for the next calendar quarter. We hope OAL accepts that, the justifications we put forward to do that at the same time upon adoption. So Matthew Gibson will be here. Is he next or not? Let's see. He's next. So maybe this is a good segue. If there are no more comments, let me check to make sure there are no more comments.
This is the
Christina, thank you
moderator.
again.
Next, we're going to hear from Scott Brown. Hold on just a moment, please. Scott, we're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
I'll assume so. My name is Scott Brown. I'm a service technician and an independent shop owner in Claremont, California, 63-year-old independent service center. I have been actively engaged in ADAS for the last 6 or 7 years teaching, and it was encouraging to hear that ADAS is going to be incorporated into the vehicle safety inspection program, but I would encourage it to get accelerated. I've got numerous case studies, but one more importantly is a young lady came into our service center a couple years ago, purchased a 19 Honda Civic, and she purchased as a salvage vehicle. And the whole dash was lit up with, automatic emergency braking inoperative, active safety systems were just, everything was shut off. And her complaint was that the car would actually change lanes just randomly on her. And we were able to correct the vehicle, but I could not believe that this vehicle got a, brake and light certificate and got certified to be put back on the road. I know it's outside of the current brake and light inspection at that time, but anyways, I know we're moving forward, but I would love to see this accelerated, and I'm here to see if I can help in any way. And I actually have a great case study video that I would be glad to share with any interested parties. Thank you.
I think we'd be interested, most definitely, and we'll put Matthew Gibson in touch with you, Scott. Thank you very much for the feedback.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Other comments?
There are no other requests for comment.
All right. We will close this agenda item. Thank you both, Holly and Kayla. And here to segue into the topic that seems to be gathering some attention in Holly and Kayla's presentation on the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program regulations is Matthew Gibson to talk about or present to us the plan for rolling out the new program once the regulations are adopted. Yeah, I did. I didn't get any. Good morning, Matt.
Morning. Oh, it is on. Good. Since you already introduced me, I guess I should just get going.
Yeah,
right?
Matthew Gibson with the Bureau's executive office.
All right. So
He's been our point person for the last 2.5 years, I believe, on the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program. Ever since it was chaptered, it hadn't taken effect yet, but we knew we needed to get moving on it. And so we created a position. Matthew applied for it, and he was in this role for the last 2 years working on this program.
So I'm actually here to give two separate presentations today.
That's right.
And the first one is actually going to be on the ARD registration renewal process, which was associated obviously with the Assembly Bill 471 project.
Thank you.
So I'll do that one first, and then we'll get to the vehicle safety system.
Sure. I skipped ahead.
All right, no worries. So I'm Matthew Gibson, Program Manager in BAR's Executive Office, and I'm here to give you guys information on the ARD renewal requirement regulations. But before we start talking about the ARD renewal requirement regulations, we have to talk about the ARD application requirement regulations that were necessary as a result of changes to Business and Professions Code Section 9884 as a result of Assembly Bill 471. Those regulations actually got adopted in May of last year and became effective on July 1st of 2023. Those regulations detailed all the information required on an ARD application. And because they were detailed, it allowed BAR to forego incorporating the actual ARD application form in regulation. These regulations also require an applicant to provide identifying information about the business, including some new requirements. Go to the next slide. And those were an email address, as well as a license plate for those businesses that identify themselves as being a mobile automotive repair dealer. It also gave applicants the opportunity to provide the Bureau with nationally recognized and industry accepted, as well as Bureau approved educational certifications for their business and for their employees, and allows applicants up to 30 days to notify the Bureau of any material change to the information they provided on the application. So the new ARD registration renewal requirements are necessary for BAR to obtain that newly required application information, specifically thinking about the email address, from BAR's existing ARD population. And so the ARD registration renewal requirements were adopted actually in December of last year, and they become effective on April 1st. So those regulations require existing ARDs to provide the Bureau with written notice of any changes to the information required by the ARD application as a condition of renewal. And it creates an opportunity for existing ARDs to provide the Bureau with educational certifications for the business and for its employees. Next slide. So the benefits of collecting an email address from ARD applicants and from existing ARDs is that it will allow BAR to move from a paper to a digital service model, which will allow for electronic notifications, increased efficiencies, such as reduction in incomplete applications, postage fees. It'll also allow for an ARD to the ability to electronically update their information in accordance with the 30-day notification requirements or on renewal. And there's an improved ability to monitor application processing metrics. Next slide. And on educational certifications, the new regulations will require BAR to accept educational certifications from existing ARDs. This will allow BAR to post that certification information on BAR's Auto Shop locator. And just to remind everybody, there's two different types of acceptable educational certifications. So the first one is nationally recognized and industry accepted, which means a diploma, a certificate of completion, or a degree received after successful completion of and or testing by an automotive repair provided by the vehicle manufacturer, ICAR, next slide, ASC, and an accredited educational institution or trade school. A Bureau-approved educational certification means a certification issued after successful completion of training that has been evaluated and determined by the Bureau to be effective in educating the automotive repair industry on diagnosis and repair of a motor vehicle and or the Bureau's laws and regulations and or customer service related to automotive repair. And that's it on that.
Thank you. Any questions, comments from advisory group members sitting on the dais with me? We'll go to the far left. Jeff Cox, almost to the far left, one seat away.
Thank you. Thanks, Matt. Great presentation. On the education certifications, is it a list that you accept, examples, ICAR, ASE, or do other training? If they got a training certificate from the local Napa training center, can they post that there? What maybe I'll just stop there and let you answer that.
It's all right. So there's two different buckets, right? So the nationally recognized and industry accepted bucket is the one that's most prescriptive, right? It talks about the idea that ASE certifications are accepted, ICAR. The wording in the presentation is pretty much from the regulations. And also anything from a vehicle manufacturer related to automotive repair. And also anything from an accredited educational institution or trade school. Anything that doesn't fall within that category can be considered Bureau approved if we determine that that training meets, well, is beneficial to the industry and training on the three topics I covered in the presentation. So the repair of motor vehicles or our laws and regulations or customer service. So I think right now we only have one Bureau approved certified training provider. But there's a bunch of nationally recognized and industry accepted ones, including ICAR and ASE.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Additional comments, Mr. Anapolsky?
Hey, Matt. On the educational certificates, once BAR, I assume you're going to put that on the website for the particular licensee. Is that right?
Yeah, so the plan is that we have our auto shop locator and that when you look up the information for an individual shop or list of shops based on whatever it is you're looking for or area where you're looking for repair, the shop information would indicate that they have provided us educational certifications.
Okay, so it's for the consumer also to,
It's primarily for the consumer.
okay. Is BAR going to have any further usage for the educational certifications?
Well, we have them for our individual licenses, right? So, obviously for smog check licenses, you have to have ASEs.
What I'm thinking of is in a disciplinary proceeding, if a shop has educational certificates, is that going to be viewed as a factor in mitigation?
Well, so what I will say, independent of discipline, like if we're talking about the citation process, when we wrote those regulations, we specifically made it a mitigating factor, or well, actually, it was aggravating or mitigating depending on the circumstances, but it specifically has a bearing on our citation process. It may have a bearing on the disciplinary process, but it would depend on the ad law judge and how he views it if it's brought up.
Would BAR view a shop that was attempting to mitigate its own deficiencies by gathering educational certificates as a factor that would help the BAR determine whether or not the shop is eligible for probation? You know what
You mean like in a stipulated settlement?
Exactly. So if we're going to be negotiating a settlement of a case and the ARD has, by way of trying to mitigate or fix the problem that brings the ARD before BAR, if the ARD goes out and obtains educational certifications, is that something that the BAR would look favorably on?
Possibly.
Okay.
I only say I'm not involved in the stipulated settlement, so I'm not going to be able to give you a yes or no on how we would make that decision, but it seems like it should or could.
Okay,
I
so
think it
it's
could.
basically a case-by-case analysis.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Consistency on a case-by-case basis, no doubt. Consistency on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Bud Rice.
Just real quick, I'm asking for a comfort level position there. Okay, so you said two things. You said somebody who gets a ARD and then someone who renews an ARD. You covered both those. What we see in the field a lot, so that's where I'm going for some kind of comfort level here, is some shops get into a problem and they have an issue and they start flipping who's the owner. It's the sister or second removed brother who's now the ARD holder, but now it's the wife who used to work and now it's the husband again. And these things are flipping around like crazy. The intent is for them to get around an issue or problem that they've had with BAR, but these shops are flipping around like crazy. And on the industry side, we see that this is what's going on over here. So I was just, again, looking for a comfort level that you guys know it, you see it, and you try to mitigate that somehow so that that doesn't happen. Thank you.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand. So what you're asking me is, how closely do we watch change of ownerships to see if they're subverting the disciplinary process from the Bureau? Okay.
Yes.
We have a whole process in place. Field office, I don't know if I should be doing this or Bill, but fundamentally, I'll cover real quick as much as I can say. So field offices, when they're interested in repair facilities, will put flags within our system. That means we're watching a repair facility to determine if they submit an application at that address to change the ownership. We have a process for application investigations. We have a person dedicated to just dealing with our application investigations, in addition to the field offices actually conducting those. And then we will deny or approve applications if we believe there's evidence to support that they are doing exactly as you suggested.
That was good. Additional questions, comments? Mr. Robinette?
Yeah, Matt, hey, a quick question for clarification too. I know that when you were talking about the accepted education, there's a notion out there that I know that some education it's a one and done. I've got it. I got my certificate. I took this class. I'm qualified, certified, whatever in this particular topic at this time. It is also the case that a lot of the education out there has an expiration date, if you will, has renewal dates, if you will. So the point of my question is in that consideration of those requirements for education, is there any provision as to its current status pursuant to whether it's renewed or expired or whatever the case may be? And that might feed back into Lou's question as well a little bit, where how's that considered and how's that seen?
So when we were working through the educational process, that actually at the moment, I think we kind of stopped. We're already accepting educational certifications. Let's start there. And when you accept an educational certification, you actually have to provide us with a copy of the document. And the document itself, if it has an expiration date, is noted by us. We have it. And so we can track it. We also were working on a digital process for that information to be provided to us in our ELM project. And then that digitally putting in the expiration date would automatically cause it to fall off. And I'm using quotes here from
Sure,
being
sure.
advertised
And that makes sense to the website where the consumer can see those education documents or whatever that certification may be. Those with an end date or an expiration, does that change on the website too if that happens to fall out or comes back in with renewal? That seems a little complicated, perhaps.
Well, they would just.
There is an expectation that the ARD, and you've already pointed this out, is supposed to keep those up to date.
Yeah, independent of it, I feel like we have expiration dates covered as long as we know the expiration date and that the system will handle it. I'm more concerned actually about, as technicians come and go, that information is being updated by the ARD, which is also something we're talking about in the renewal process, as far as making sure we have that information.
Good. That was just my question, is how closely we're tracking that aspect.
Right. Okay.
Jack Molodonov.
Thanks, Matt. A couple of questions on the educational certificates. So are you collecting that information now?
We have been collecting that information. Yes.
On both the application and the renewal?
Not on the renewals, just on the application.
So right now there's a space for the educational certificate.
On the application.
Correct. Okay.
The renewal regulations you pointed out do not take effect till April 1, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So April 1st, you'll start collecting that information, the educational certificate information.
That's our intent right now.
Okay.
We're still working out the logistics on how it's going to happen.
So the application, you're also collecting the email addresses now.
And we have been, actually, I think we started even before the July 1st effective date of those regulations, but yes, we are.
Okay. On the educational certificates, is there a limit on how many certificates you can accept? So example, collision repair, they may have ICAR, they may be certified with the vehicle manufacturer, Ford, Chevy, whatever, is there a limit?
There's not a limit we can accept, but there's almost a limit as much as how much we can post, just based on space. So
what's that limit?
I don't exactly know at the moment.
3.
But I would.
No, I'm kidding.
Is it 3?
No,
I figured it out.
No. We'll have to talk to our technical team to see what, how many we can post. I mean, I'm sure they'll try to be as creative as they can, but the list can get somewhat exhaustive to the point where it's not of value or help to the consumer. I think we're looking at doing it through icons, little pictures rather than words.
Yeah.
That does save space on your website. But I don't know there is no set limit at this point. We'll have to work through with the technical team.
So on the application you're accepting, the educational certificates, are those posted now?
They are not posted now.
Okay. but you are accepting them. So if a shop lists their educational certificates, you haven't posted them, but if a BR representative goes to the shop, okay, on a complaint, will the BA representative be able to know what certificates, educational certificates the shop has?
Well, they would, I would say there's probably two ways they would know. One, as we're collecting that information, it's being stored in licensing. I don't know that the field would have I don't know if they'd have direct access to that without asking for it. Like, I don't think they're going to log in and find it.
Okay.
Could be wrong, but I don't think I am. But having said that, if a field rep is in the shop, he can figure out
Okay.
by what certificates they have.
At some point, then, once they're posted, the BR rep will know because it'll be public information. I would assume that before they even go to the shop in a complaint, they'll know the educational certificates.
Well, it'll be on our website, there's no doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
When you're collecting email addresses, if we have, like AAA, multiple locations with different ARD numbers, and all those email addresses are going to funnel to presumably one person, whoever's handling this, do you foresee any issues with having multiple places going to the same email address, or is it just kind of going to work its way out?
Well, let me put it this way. Once we have your email as part of your facility record in the consumer affairs system in CAS, we are going to be able to start sending you stuff, and it's going to be considered served. Not disciplinary actions, but other stuff. If you have one email box for multiple locations, somebody's going to have to make sure it gets to the person who needs to have it. And also, we want to make sure that the information is also updated, because our record is going to be accurate to us, even if it's not accurate to you, as far as your email address and you being the business.
Thank you, Matt. That was Matt Cheney with AAA. Any other questions, comments from the advisory group members sitting here? Not look like, oh yes, Ruben Parra.
Thank you for your presentation. Just to be clear, so we're talking about registration renewal and application and certificates and evidence of education, but there is no actual requirement for an ARD to show any kind of for just an ARD license. There is no requirement, correct?
There is no requirement.
Thank you.
Additional comments, questions from advisory group members who are attending virtually via WebEx? Do we see a hand raised or anything, moderators?
Nobody yet.
Nobody yet. Okay, let's open it up for public comment on this presentation.
All right.
Well, not virtually yet. Let me try to go through the room here in person. I'll get there in just a moment. Anyone in the room? This is the conference room here, or the hearing room here. Okay, I do not see anyone in attendance in person here. So moderator, we can now open it up for public comment on the WebEx, the virtual platform.
All right. First, we have a question from Joe, who does not have a microphone. And he asks, who enforces the shops that are operating and do not have an ARD license?
The Bureau of Automotive Repair.
Thank you. And next, Rob Wright, we're going to give you an opportunity to speak your question. Hang on just a moment, please.
We know him.
Some of us know him better than others.
Yes, a former employee of the bureaus. Hello, Rob.
Good morning, everyone.
Hi, Rob.
Hey, so just quick question on the education certificates. Will there be a consideration or an additional opportunity for shops to submit their education certificates or update that outside of the application or renewal? In other words, just like the change of name and address or corporate officers form?
Yeah, so when we were originally working in this process out, it's almost going to have to be a portal through our website where you can update or, provide not just educational certification information changes, but other changes to your, shop information, like your email address if necessary. But the point is that the goal would be to allow a shop to adjust the educational certification information in real time as technicians come or go, or as they get additional certifications for their employees.
And that is all part of our business modernization effort that we are looking to roll out this year.
I'm very happy to hear it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, and good to see you, hear you.
Likewise.
Additional comments on the WebEx?
All right. We're going to give everyone one last chance to raise their hand and request to speak. I should throw out a note here. Christina Kubran or Scott Brown, I have a message into you for contact information. If you could find your chat button and respond to those messages, that would be great. And I saw a hand pop up and it's disappeared. Please put that hand back up. Okay, I think that hand may have been put up in error, in which case we don't have any other requests for comment.
We can close
hold-
the comment period for this presentation. Thank you, moderator.
One more thing.
Oh, yes.
How do I get a renewal ARD sent to my email and not the store?
Okay, so you're talking about a renewal notice, and we have to get email addresses from ARDs so that we could theoretically email them things like renewal notices. However, we don't have a process in place for that yet.
It is coming.
All right.
Good question.
And that concludes our questions for the moment.
All right, we'll close out the public comment period for this agenda item. And I think that does it for this presentation and agenda item. You get to stay and do the next presentation that I had announced, which is an update on our Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program and the planned rollout.
Yes.
So welcome again, Matthew Gibson.
Thank you, Pat. You can go back or not. You can stay there. Yeah. So, all right. So I'm here to give information on the Vehicle Safety System Inspection Program rollout. So, next slide. So as indicated in an email from Chief DeRay back in November last year, BAR has developed a three-phased approach for implementation of the Vehicle Safety System Inspection Program. The first phase will be the licensing of safety system inspection stations and technicians, and that will begin on the regulation effective date. The second phase, we anticipate, should start in spring of 2024, or approximately 3 months after the regulation effective date, and that will begin the vehicle safety system inspections. The third phase will be the sunset of the brake and lamp inspection programs, and that'll be 6 months after the regulation effective date. Next slide. All right, so on the licensing of safety system stations and technicians, on the effective date of the regulations, BAR will make available and begin accepting safety system station and technician applications from new stations and technician applicants, as well as existing brake and lamp adjusters, and it should say and stations, utilizing the specialized licensing process. Additionally, the initial licensing exam for the safety system technicians will be made available by PSI. The initial licensing inspection will begin for safety system inspection stations, and safety system certificates of compliance will be available for purchase by licensed stations. BAR will stop accepting new brake and lamp station and adjuster applications, but brake and lamp stations will still be able to renew their station licenses until the start date of the vehicle safety system inspections. And the reason we put this in place is because if you were a brake and lamp station whose licenses went delinquent after the regulation effective date, but prior to the initiation of the vehicle safety system inspections, you wouldn't be permitted to perform any inspections. So to preserve a brake and lamp station's ability to perform inspections in that interim period, and to buy brake and lamp certs, we have to allow them to renew their licenses. And so that is why we put that in place. However, brake and lamp adjusters will not be able to renew their licenses. And this was after some internal discussion And a lot of it, there was some consideration about the complexity of actually renewing your brake and lamp license. It's not paying a fee. There's a whole nother exam process you have to go through. And in addition to that, we've internally decided that a safety system technician will be permitted to sign brake and lamp certificates of compliance because we have determined that a safety system license is a higher level license than a brake license or a lamp license. So any brake and lamp adjuster who goes delinquent has the ability to use the specialized licensing process to become a vehicle safety system technician. Okay, again, next slide. So BAR anticipates stations and technicians will begin performing safety system inspections 3 months after the regulation effective date. This will allow BAR to ensure there's enough safety system stations and technicians to provide the new inspection. The vehicle safety system inspection program and brake and lamp inspection programs to run. This will allow them to run concurrently for 3 months to ensure a smooth transition between those programs. Safety system stations and technicians, this period of time will allow them to become familiar with the new inspection requirements and will allow BAR to ensure the program is working as anticipated. And as I mentioned on the prior slide, on the 3 months after, on the initiation of safety system inspections, BAR will no longer accept brake and lamp station renewal applications. Okay, get the next slide. Okay, so phase 3, the sunset of brake and lamp. So 6 months after the regulation effective date, brake and lamp station and adjuster licenses will cease to be valid as an operation of law. BAR will no longer make available or sell brake and lamp certificates of compliance, and DMV will no longer accept brake and lamp certificates of compliance for registration purposes. And at that time, BAR most likely will have already started collecting and refunding all unused brake and lamp certificates of compliance. Next slide. The last update we gave on the vehicle safety system inspection program was in our fall of 2023 auto repair smog check newsletter, and you can find that on our website if you wanted to get more specifics on where we're at in the process, although the regulation update is kind of really where we're at that you got this morning. And also, if you want to get updates in real time related to where we're at in this program, as far as when we'll start accepting licenses or when we're going to start doing inspections, you can join the email list in the quick link section on the BAR homepage. And the next slide. And that's it.
Thank you, Matt. We'll open it up for some questions in just a moment, but I want to say the 3 phases. We couldn't do this on a presentation and lock in dates because the regulations are still pending review at the Office of Administrative Law, or OAL. But if the regulations are adopted, as we hope, we've been given a kind of a loose time frame from on the presumptive time that it takes OAL to review packages. I think it's 30 business days. We have targeted February 13th. Oh, I should say one other thing. And if they allow our regulations and honor our requests or agree to our request to have them take effect on the day they are adopted, which is an unusual request. It doesn't happen. It's rare, I should say. You have to make a pretty valid justification why that should occur. So if those 2 things happen, if we are getting them adopted and taking effect on February 13th, that would be the beginning of phase 1. Let's just start there. Phase 2 is 3 months. So I skipped a month, March, April, May, sometime around May 13th. And then phase 3, 6 months, the sunset would occur, and that would be June, July, August. So just to give you some rough dates, you can kind of put those on the 3 slides. That's what we're targeting. And we just want to kind of broadcast that. Although we couldn't put that in a presentation, not a living document. It's posted, and I didn't want to put that information out there in a presentation like this. But I do want to at least announce verbally here today the timeframes we're looking at. Again, that's all based on adoption on a certain date and taking the regulations taking effect on that very same date. Questions, comments from the advisory group members? Yes, Mr. Cheney.
Hey, Matt, will the equipment that's needed from the shops be similar to what's being used already for brake and lamp inspections? Or is there going to be additional things we need to purchase?
Well, if you are a brake and lamp station that's also a smog check station, you will have almost all the, I mean, you probably already have all the equipment that would be necessary to be a vehicle safety system technician, or a vehicle safety system inspection station. In that, in addition to having the tools for what that are required for brake and lamp, you would have to have the what we call, well, bar OAS or CalViz, depending on what we're calling it now. The only other piece of equipment I can think that's new, I don't know that it's specifically required in the brake inspection program, is a tire depth gauge, but that might be the only thing.
We've got that handled.
Yeah, I'm sure they probably have that app.
Yep. Thank you, Matt. Any others? We'll get Jack real quickly so I can go just down the row here.
Yeah, and thanks for the presentation, but how are you notifying the existing brake and lamp stations of, the transition here? Because I'm sure many may not know. How are we giving, letting them know that you're going to need to, if you want to continue conducting inspections, you have to be a safety systems inspection station now rather than brake and lamp.
So we've been doing presentations, but independent of that, we're also going to be putting up on our website a safety systems inspection program page so they can find information there. And additionally, on the effective date of the regulations, we're going to send out letters to all brake and lamp stations to let them know they can submit their application and become a vehicle safety system technician station. We did send out emails laying out the phases. I don't know that we're hiding anything from anybody about, and not that I'm suggesting that's what you said, but the point is 6 months after we start safety systems, brake and lamp is no more. So, but I'm sure we'll probably cover that in the letter that we send out to the stations as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks. I just want to make sure they're notified, because if they're not involved with their association or, attend these meetings, they may or may not know what's going on.
Yeah, we did send out, when we filed the regulations for the 45-day comment period, we did send out letters to all brake or lamp stations and adjusters to let them know about the specialized licensing process, and that they had this period of time prior to the effective date of the regulations to go get the license that they are missing so that they could take advantage of that specialized licensing process. I don't know. I was told by our new licensing manager, Michael Villarreal, that there has been an increase in the amount of applications that were received, but I don't have the specific numbers. And also, that was actually a pretty small number, so I don't know that it would have been a tremendous difference.
What did I do with my presentation here? Oh, there it is. Real quickly, Matt, I got more questions that are going to be asked by the advisory group, I'm sure. But just real quickly, could you discuss those specialized licensing process for a current lamp and brake station and lamp and brake adjuster to transition into the new program?
Yeah, so if you are a current lamp and brake station and your licenses are active on the effective date of the new program, and you're not on probation, and you do not have any pending disciplinary action, you can fill out an application and you will receive the new license, the new safety system inspection license, and we are foregoing any application fee for that new license.
Right.
If you are a brake and lamp adjuster, and those licenses are active on the effective date of the program, and you're not on probation, and you don't have pending disciplinary action, same thing. You can fill out an application, and we will give you that license. But not only are we foregoing the application fee, we're also foregoing the requirement of brake and lamp adjusters to take the initial licensing exam, and also foregoing the requirement for them to have the ASCs on the initial licensing, on the initial issuance of the new safety system license. However, the license is a 2-year license, and they'll have to have those ASCs when they renew.
Thank you. Let me get a couple more comments before I circle back to you. Mr. Kusa.
Thanks, Pat. Hi, Matt. Will the new DAD be required if you don't do SMOGs and become a vehicle safety inspection station?
The requirement as written in the regulations for their equipment for a safety system station points back to the requirement for the DAD in the smog check regulations. So whatever smog check has to have, as far as whatever version of DAD they're using, is the one the station will have to have.
Do we anticipate the DAD regulations coming out first or these regulations coming out first? Because my point is I don't want somebody to go buy a machine that they have to update in a month.
Yeah, I'm going to win.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to win by at least a year, but I guess we'll see. I don't think the regs are going to take a year, but I think after they get the regulations, then they have to build them and then they have to sell them. And so I think that at some point, once the DAD 2.0 is in place, the safety system stations that are not smog check stations will have to get the second generation data acquisition device.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, the regulations, once they're adopted for the DAD 2.0 regulations, there's going to be a whole process working with the equipment manufacturers, the DAD 2.0 manufacturers, to certify the equipment. And there's going to be production and distribution. I mean, this could take a little time. Yes. So, yeah. I'll go this way, and we'll go with Anthony. Anthony, sorry.
Thank you, Pat. I'd like to raise awareness of this transition directly from our association to our members, even though I'm sure that BAR has endeavored to, to raise awareness through your own means. I know our members, it's beneficial to just kind of hit them as many times as possible from as many directions as possible, raising awareness of something like this. So to the extent possible, would it behoove me to take a look at the fall 23 article, or is there more recent resources that I should be looking at, or should we just talk offline about what would be the best source of information for me to repurpose when we're sending out communiques to our members?
We could talk offline, but I will say that there was an email that was sent out by Pat to our email list at the beginning of the 45-day comment period. I think the most important thing for your members to know, I would assume, is literally the 3 phases of the transition between these 2 programs. And we will also be sending out another email once we hit the regulation effective date, which is going to cover where we're at and what still is to come and when it's supposed to come, because we'll have dates at that point. And you could take that email and forward it on to your members. It might be the best way to go, or you can give them a link into our website where we'll have the vehicle safety system inspection page. But again, if you feel like you want more than that, we can talk after the meeting.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for assisting us in the outreach effort. Additional questions, comments? Matt, on this far end, had another follow-up question.
The requirements to have the vehicle safety, whatever the mouthful of stuff is it going to be similar to what we're doing already with brake-in lamps, just a repurposed salvage car? And I believe there was some other stipulation. We have an out-of-state car from an auction or something. Is that where we're going to start?
Well, it's a direct replacement program. So yeah, whatever we're using brake-in lamp for right now, we're going to use safety system instead. So,
But salvage, yes.
Well, it's primarily used for reviving salvage titles to, reviving total loss vehicles to a salvage title.
And there's an inspection of emergency vehicles and the
Yes,
like.
that too.
But it is a more comprehensive inspection than lamp and brake. Of course, it is lamp and brake. It's a lamp and brake plus.
Yeah, Bud asked earlier. You covered most of it. It's good.
Yes. Just to reiterate. Let's ask additional advisory group members attending through our virtual platform, WebEx. Any hands from those advisory group members?
No hands yet.
Okay, I will open it up for public comment first in the room. Anybody
I
in the
take
audience?
that back. We have hands now that we've mentioned it.
I didn't give enough time there to make that transition. All right.
Joanna
public?
Johnson,
Are they
you
public
have
comments? Oh, no, Joanna's a advisory group member. Yes.
you have the ability to unmute.
All right, thank you very much. Hi, Chief DeRay. Sorry about the software hiccups today. I tried to get my hand up for Matt during the first part of his section and I missed it. So apologies for me asking this out of order. But I'm just curious to know, is there, in terms of getting BAR approval for training programs that are not smog check or remedial, everything else, is there an application for that online at this point? I just haven't seen one.
There's not an application, but here's how this is how we're planning on making this work. So if we're talking about those certifications that are received from somebody other than a nationally recognized and industry accepted provider of educational certifications, which we went through that list earlier. Once we receive those certifications, we will look into those institutions to determine if they meet the requirements that would make them Bureau-approved educational certifications, and then we'll add them to a list of Bureau-approved educational certifications. We don't have it structured in such a way that we are accepting applications at this point. Not to say that we couldn't, but
No, but there's a two-step process essentially. First is to go to our sister agency within the Department of Consumer Affairs, another bureau, the Bureau for Private Post-Secondary and Vocational Education. You either have to be an approved educational, what is it, educational institution, or an exempted one pursuant to their laws and regulations. There is one that's gone through that process and they got an exemption. So you have to get some kind of sign off from BPPE, Bureau for Private Post-Secondary, Bureau for Private and Post-Secondary Education, BPE. They're another agency within the Department of Consumer Affairs. Then after you've gotten that, you contact us and tell us that you've gotten that, but it has to fit one of the three categories or criteria, which is it deals with automotive repair, customer service, or what was the third? Laws and regulations. It has to meet one of those three categories.
so I don't know how many.
Okay, then.
Oh, I apologize. I was going to say, I don't know how
I
many.
was just going to.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Sorry, Matt. Sorry, Matt.
You go first.
Okay. Sorry. Okay, I was just going to ask who should we submit that? Who should we submit that to at BAR if we get over all those hurdles?
Well, my email address should be on the screen. You can send them to me directly. So
To
right
you?
now,
Okay, thank
well, uncertain
you.
about how many training institutions that didn't meet the nationally recognized and industry accepted definition. We didn't know how many there were going to be. So anyway, yeah, send it to me and I will look into it.
Okay, thank you.
That was Joanna Johnson, the designated alternate to Matthew Webb with the Preventative Automotive Maintenance Association. I was unable to introduce her when we kicked off the meeting. I think she was having some technical issues or difficulties connecting to the meeting. Other advisory group members to ask a question on this presentation dealing with the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program rollout.
No other hands up.
Okay, I'm going to go to public comment in the room relating to the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection Program rollout.
And our first request comes from Jean Lopez. Hold on just a moment. We're sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
And now we'll go to public comment on the WebEx.
Morning, Chief DeRay, BAG members. Matt,
Can you
thank
get the volume turned up a little bit, Mr. Lopez?
Let me try that a little bit better. How about,
Yeah, that's good.
now? Yeah.
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah. Chief DeRay, BAG members, Matt, thank you for this presentation. So, I go back and I'm going to continue to ask because I just went, as you know, Sidner's Collision Center, throughout the year, we have an opportunity to gift a vehicle to a needy family via the Orange County Habitat for Humanity. And we just did a couple of vehicles. And, I personally went to the safety, the lamp and brake inspection. Sometimes there's a couple days out, right? You just can't pull into these shops. But each of these vehicles had ADAS on them. And so, because of the damage, we had to calibrate. But, brake and lamp, they're not checking this. And when it's a salvage title, I think we need to do something about that. Someone needs to be able to say, or at least provide information to that safety station, the Vehicle Safety Systems Inspection, that this car's been calibrated and documented, and the calibration's been documented. I think we need to do something like that because I mean, you know, we fixed the 2018 with ADAS on it, and we fixed the 2021 with ADAS on it. They, you know, they were both, you know, salvage vehicles. And there could, you know, there could be some repairs out there that aren't doing this. And someone may be driving that car expecting it to, you know, recognize in their blind spot monitor that, you know, there's a vehicle there and it doesn't work, and they change lanes and, you know, boom. So I brought it up in the past, and I think I need to continue to bring it up until we recognize the importance of reviewing ADAS calibration. Thanks.
We hear you loud and clear, Gene. We're just not ready yet. You need to collect some data, pull some data from the vehicles once the program begins. That'll be the first step in moving towards what we all agree needs to be part of this inspection program. We'll get there.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Additional public comments on the WebEx.
Next, we're going to hear from Bernardo Soria. Bernardo, I see you've written a comment. We're going to give you an opportunity to say what you wrote down. All right, Bernardo, we're going to send you one more request to unmute your microphone. All right, let me just read what is written and hope for the best.
Okay. Thank you.
What is the initial upfront cost for the vehicle safety systems? The manual specifies $1,500, but keep in mind new vehicle acquisition device costs just about $1,500. The requirement of an ADS machine is $35,000. What is the most appropriate cost for the rollout of this new platform? What is the transition going to look like for Class A brake lamp stations into vehicle safety systems?
There is multiple questions. I'll have to try to take them one at a time. First off, our manual doesn't have a cost in it. It has equipment requirements. And the equipment requirements for a safety system station are very similar, obviously, to a brake and lamp station, but obviously include what is now, or the BAR OIS inspection equipment, which is used by smog check facilities in order to plug into the vehicles, communicate, and also to issue electronic certifications. I don't know off the top of my head, nor am I wanting to guess how much a BAR OIS costs. I imagine some people actually lease them as opposed to purchasing them. So that if you were a brake and lamp station, actually, if you're an automotive repair facility and you're not a smog check station, I would imagine that's probably the largest cost to become a safety system inspection station would be the inspection equipment, specifically what we're calling BAR SIS, right? Safety inspection system. That was the first part. Oh, you mentioned there was a question about ADAS calibration equipment is not required as part of this inspection, which is kind of what Gene was talking about. So that $35,000 can stay in your pocket until such time we determine that you need to have it. Having said that, when we get to ADAS, I imagine we won't start with calibration initially. And I think I've said this in a prior presentation. We probably will start by just scanning all systems once we feel like we can communicate with those systems and just verifying that the systems that the vehicle was equipped with are present. And I mean, ADAS systems are present, and that there aren't any diagnostic trouble codes associated with those systems, so that none of those ADAS systems have been, just turned off. And then after some point, if we, feel like we're needing to do calibration too, then we would include it because the system is structured in such a way to allow us to grow it into additional areas. What was the last question? There's another
What
one.
is the transition going to look like for Class A brake and lamp stations into vehicle safety systems?
So there are no more class systems in the safety systems inspection program. So if you were a Class A station, or if you had, it doesn't matter what class you're in, as long as you have an active brake and lamp station license or brake and lamp adjuster license, you take advantage of the specialized licensing process in order to get the safety systems licenses. We did away with the classes.
That's a good question, though. Yep. Thank you. Moderator, any additional public comments on this presentation?
No other requests for comment.
All right, we'll close it out. Any other last thoughts, questions? Thank you, Matthew or Matt. Appreciate the two presentations. All right. Our next presenter, a face and name we are intimately familiar with, Alan Morrison, who's no longer an employee with the state of California, but now looks like you are consulting. You've retired from the state and now consulting, and have a presentation that you asked us if the advisory group would be interested in. And I reached out to some members and got a thumbs up. Standards development for electric vehicle fluids and coolants. Alan used to be with Weights and Measures at the Food and Agriculture Department here in the state of California, and now it looks like you have your own consulting firm, AMT Consulting. So welcome back.
Yes.
This is about your third or fourth appearance before the advisory group over the last 5 or more years, I guess. But thank you again for being here.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Again, I'm Alan. For those that don't know me, I'm Alan Morrison. I retired in 2022 from the state of California, where I was with Division Measurement Standards, a part of California Department of Food and Ag. Since that time, basically AMT Consulting is myself. I've been continuing my work with the ASTM organization on development of standards. Primarily, I don't work for anybody. It's just myself. It's almost a hobby that I have, continuing my efforts that I did my 20 some odd years with the state. This is who I am, my contact information. Next slide, please. I'll do a little bit of overview. I just wanted to inform the advisory group what I'm doing and if I could be a resource for the agency, if there's any future needs or anything like that. I'll go a little bit over some of the introduction to my ASTM activities. I'll speak a little bit about my development of new standard specification for EV coolants, some standard specifications that I did for natural gas vehicles, both the natural gas and natural gas hydrogen blended vehicles, kind of the impact that hydrogen has on natural gas vehicles, and a little bit about work I'm doing with the NCWM on Handbook 130, and a brief discussion about EV lubricants. We have a new standard in SAE J3200, which is an EV lubricant specification. And then finally, future concerns. Okay, the next slide. What I'll do is I'll go through the various ASTM committees that I'm part of and kind of give a real quick overview. The first one, of course, is the DO3 and DO3 sub 2. I am the sub-chairman of a fuels quality specification for gaseous fuels. We're responsible for developing any gaseous fuel specification other than hydrogen. Hydrogen is covered by SAE, but we will do natural gas, hydrogen blends. There's some discussion about even ammonia as a motor vehicle fuel. So we're working on that. We also work on necessary test methods, necessary changes to practices that are needed for those new fuels. Next slide. Okay, this is the one on EV coolants. I am the sub-chair of D1526. It is again a new subcommittee in the ASTM group on developing quality specifications for coolants used in EVs. We also do new test methods, new corrosion methods, anything related to EV coolants. Okay, the next slide. This is a brand new coordinating subcommittee that we're starting in ASTM DO2, which is on fuels and lubricants. It's a coordinating subcommittee to look at all the various organizations that are doing work on EV fluids, coolants, lubricants, gear, greases, any type of lubricant or fluid that is going into new EVs. So I put up what our proposed scope is, which is sort of to serve as a collection agency. So if you have issues or concerns, this coordinating subcommittee, which will have no standards, can serve as a kind of a repository or as a go-to group. Okay, the next slide. I know, okay, a little bit about the DO 297 liaison. I did a quick list of the various committees, organizations, and associations that we will be liaisoning with to get information. Our plan is to have a biannual meeting where we have liaison reports and then make those public. Again, these are some of the groups, of course: ASTM, SAE, STLE, NCWM, CRC, the Coordinating Research Council, some lubricant associations, and of course, International Fluid Consortium and the like. And there will be additional groups as we proceed. We have to identify those and add them. Okay, next one. Kind of a real quick overview. EV coolants. Everybody asks, why do we need specialized coolant specification for EV vehicles? I put this up as a kind of a general idea of the complexity of EV cooling systems. Unlike an IC engine, which basically has a radiator, an engine, a heater core, which is all one cooling system, EVs have cooling systems for the batteries. They have cooling systems for the vehicle itself, the interior of the vehicle. They have cooling systems for the electric motors. In some cases, those can all be separate systems. So you can have 3 to 4 different cooling systems within an EV vehicle, and each cooling system has specific requirements. Currently, most EV vehicles on the market are using IC engine coolants, but there is a movement away in the OEM development away from this into these specialized coolants. My goal is not to generate the OEM specifications, but to generate more of a broad kind of classification that, for those of you that know some of my additional work, helps in the labeling. So your repair shop, so you go out, you have an EV, say a battery system, you can go out and purchase a product that will identify as a coolant specific for that system. A little bit, I don't know if you can see it here. Again, you can see the complexity. They have I took these off of various websites, but the Chevy Volt, they have the electric battery system, they have the AC, the air conditioning, heating systems, they have the transmission, and then they have, if it's a hybrid vehicle, they might have the engine system. So it can be quite complex. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. A little bit about what I'm working on is I currently have 5 new specifications that I'm in the process of developing. One is specific for fuel cell vehicles. Fuel cell vehicles have a need for very low conductivity coolants that have very specialized systems on preventing corrosion and the like. The second one is a low conductivity coolant. And this is an idea or a plan that OEMs have to make your coolants low electrical conductivity, so in case of an accident and you have a rupture of the cooling system into the battery compartment, you will minimize the potential for fire or short circuiting. And so we're working on those. They involve additives that are non-ionic, that still provide corrosion protection, but do not conduct electricity or have a very low electrical conductivity. Here, the third one, of course, is the traditional formulation coolant that you would find in IC engine, but specific for EV vehicles where we have some new corrosion tests that are not required in the current IC. Primarily, the metals are different, the systems are different, they use different alloys and the like, so we want to develop that. The next category that I'm working on is what I call waterless coolant. We have 2 different types we're looking at. One, dielectric coolant that is in essence a transformer fluid. It has no electrical conductivity, a high dielectric content, high dielectric value. What that is for, so you can have the actual electrical component in the fluid directly connected to or directly in contact with the fluid, a lot like a transformer. Some of the issues there are, well, it's always exposed to the atmosphere, so you pull in moisture. Well, moisture decreases the dielectric constant, so your fluid needs to be able to fluid we're working is a high temperature fluid. This is one for the DC fast charge where you hook up, 1,000-volt DC, 50, 60, 100 amps, whatever they happen to be. Those batteries are going to be cooking when they're charging. And so you need a coolant that has a very high boiling point, has a high flash or flame point, we call it. Or auto ignition point, excuse me. So we're working on developing those coolants. And the last one is a lubricant and a coolant that shares a common sump. Think of automatic transmission fluid. An automatic transmission fluid does all the lubrication and the control, the hydraulics in an automatic transmission, but it also cools it. So there is some potential for having the EV system have a common sump. And again, that's some of the items that I'm working on. Next slide. A little bit. This is some of the additional work that I'm doing, and one of them is corrosion test. With EVs, you have a lot of electrons flowing around, so you have a lot of potential for electrolysis. We're developing new corrosion tests or making use of existing corrosion tests in other fields and bringing them into the coolant world. Elastomer compatibility. It's a hard one because nobody wants to tell you what type of elastomers or plastics they have in their system. So you have to kind of guess what is the best one. We're designing some tests. A lot of our tests are going to be modeled on what we're using for brake fluid right now. We're taking some of those tests and trying to do some modifications. Electrical conductivity, that's a problem just in the low fluids. Is how do you measure the electrical conductivity when that is extremely low? So we're doing some modifications and developing a few new test methods for that. Flash point, flame point, those are pretty much standard. The other thing we're doing is we are looking at non-vehicle applications. People like to take engine coolants and use them for say battery systems, server systems, anything that is using cooling. So we're kind of addressing a little bit of that. Next slide. Okay, this is a little bit of my work, and I didn't include it in the title, but I wanted to inform you which is gaseous fuels. We recently, as a result of about a 12-year effort to develop a specification for natural gas when used in motor vehicles, we developed a standard that is now published. In developing that, we brought in the whole industry, OEMs, gas providers, pipeline companies, testing laboratories. And one of the things about natural gas vehicles is you have to be concerned about NOx, or the same thing we do with octane rating. We call it something else, but natural gas has an octane rating. So we had to consider that. In the process, there is not a current physical test for doing NOx in natural gas. So we basically had to develop a model based on some earlier work done over the last 40 or so years. We developed a new method called D8221 to do sort of an estimation of what we call methane number calculated, which is related to the engine NOx. We were able to accomplish that. We also had to identify a couple new test methods, which I worked on. Next slide. This is a little bit about what I have. This is the actual standard that's in process, D808021. It'll eventually be adopted into California regulations under the Department of Food and Ag Division Measurement Standards. I'm not sure. I'm not associated with that department anymore, so I don't know exactly where they're at. I have some information, but I don't know where they're at on their regulations. Okay, some of what that does though is I'll make sure time-wise here. D8080 defines the criteria for either compressed natural gas or liquefied natural gas when used as a motor vehicle fuel. It establishes two performance grades. We call it grade 65 and grade 75. That is the NOx intensity. So it's sort of like having a regular and a premium fuel. There are multiple sulfur grades in there. only one impacts California, but the sulfur grades are for worldwide use. So in some jurisdictions, they require a lot of odorization, so you might have a higher level sulfur. Other areas, you have lower requirements and the like. And one thing about that, it limits hydrogen in that to 0.3% by volume because the hydrogen impacts both the NOx and then some of the performance issues of the components. Next slide here, we'll go through. California, well, California, the PUC and our all our various greenhouse gas initiatives are going to require the addition of hydrogen into the natural gas supply. There's, as part of actually, it was the Senate Bill 1369, the PUC is requiring the addition of hydrogen into natural gas supply. Current consideration is anywhere between 5% hydrogen up to about 30% hydrogen. I'm not involved in that work. I don't know exactly where it stands, but I do know that they are looking at that. But we have a problem. The current CNG vehicle fuel specification is limited to 0.3%. So let me go on the next slide. It'll be next slide. This is what hydrogen impacts an engine. When we're generating what we call a methane number calculated, or the equivalent of NOx, methane has a 100 value and hydrogen has a 0 value, a lot like in octane where you have isooctane is 100 and in heptane is 0. So it's sort of the same scale. So you can see a little bit of hydrogen would have a considerable impact on the anti-knock ability of the fuel. I put some numbers up here. They, currently the RON number, which is the method we use for liquid fuel octane, methane has about 120, hydrogen has about a 63 knot value. Or gasoline tends to be in the range of 90 to 100. This is for RON, not for the AKI, but for the RON. Engine power, adding hydrogen to the system, hydrogen has it has a high energy density per mass, but it has a low energy density per volume. So it does create some issues on the power, what we call heating, the higher heating value, the Wobbe index, and the like. And then the third item is engine durability. Hydrogen is a very, very small molecule. It gets in between the grains and metals. It causes what we call hydrogen embrittlement. It also has some issues with, say, spark plugs and the like. So those are some of our concerns. Next slide, real quick. This is the table that I put together. It basically shows the impact on those three parameters I talked about: methane number calculated, the lower heating value, and the Wobbe index. And I kind of color coded it at different levels. If we took an existing fuel that we'd have in the marketplace and we added hydrogen at those levels, when would we significantly impact each of the parameters? And so you can see that it kind of gives you an idea. A Wobbe index, there's no problem. That kind of adjusts for itself. Lower heating value is a problem, but not really, because engine designers can adjust their engines to be based on the amount of energy coming in the volume. So that can be handled through through some of the control system. One of the things we identified, though, was the NOx. And if you see here, we identified at 10%, there is any fuel that's out there in the marketplace will still meet the current standards. So we'll go down to the next slide. So what that did is that developed a new standard that actually only took about 2 years, based on the 12-year effort, D8487, which allows up to 10% hydrogen to be blended in, and it is out there at the published specification. Again, I think Measurement Standards is in the process of adopting that. Takes time, as Patrick will tell you. Regulations aren't easy. They take years, sometimes decades, depending on OAL. So CDFA is working toward that. So one of the things we are going to do with this, we are looking at coming up with a grade of higher level of hydrogen. So that's another one of my work items I have, is to increase the hydrogen up to, it's either 20 or 30%. We're kind of in discussion right now where that's going to be. but to again allow that fuel to be a legal fuel in California. Next slide, see where I'm at. Okay. Okay, a little bit. I have some involvement with the National Conference on Weights and Measures, and I think Joanna Johnson, who's on the call, is also very active. We're updating some of the labeling requirements to adopt the 8080 and the 8487. We're also working on there's a working group that is trying to build momentum on the new fluid, the EV fluid, the coolants, and some of the lubricants. They're not really transmission fluids, they're gear lubes. One of the things that's kind of interesting, right now, current California law, EV gear lubes that they're using are really not allowed under California law because they're gear lubes. So they would fall under the existing requirements for, the 85, 75, 90, 85, 120, whatever gear lubes we have. Electric vehicles use gear lubes. They're not transmission fluids. They're gear lubes because they're basically in a transaxle or a differential of sorts, but they don't meet the specifications. I think nobody right now is going out to the EV manufacturer and saying, "Hey, your fluid for your differential it doesn't have a specification." Nobody's doing that. But what we're trying to do in NCWM is to develop an ability to have that. The other thing we're trying to do is to avoid, for those of you that know me in my past life, the problems we had with automatic transmission fluids. We're trying to come up with a better system so that the producers can produce products, and the OEMs all have their own individual specifications. So there's 20 OEMs, there's 100 different specifications. It's hard for labeling a product that way. We're trying to come up with a compromise to allow that, so your shops don't get a weights and measures official knocking on their door telling them their lubricant doesn't work, when in fact it may actually work. So a little bit about what we're doing there. And see, so next slide, I guess. A little bit, just so you know that we are working on a consensus organization specification for driveline lubricants for EVs. That's under the Technical Committee 3 on the driveline chassis lubricants under SAE. We do have an existing standard, J3200. So I'm looking at that becoming part of the regulations for within the NCWM as far as labeling your fluid. I don't know where it's going to lead to. I won't promise anything, but I think that's a good start. So last slide, a little bit about future concerns, and what I would like to suggest to this advisory group is keeping your finger on updating California codes and regulations to these new fluids, new specifications, new coolants, to make sure that they're updated so that the installers do not run afoul of that. The other thing is to maybe educate the repair facilities about them, that you just don't go out and grab a coolant for your IC engine and put it in your EV vehicle, that there need for specialty fluids for those. And the last one, I thought of this at the end, building codes impacting EVs. People might not think about this, but electric vehicles have batteries which require differences in the building code, where you store it. You were speaking about storage in your shop. There have been issues of fires from those EV batteries, so they need to be concerned about that. Hydrogen. I was working with somebody who's working in Chile on heavy equipment, converting it from diesel to hydrogen, but their regulations will not allow those vehicles to be brought into a repair facility. So they have to defuel them, tow them in, do the maintenance, and then tow them back out and refuel them. So those are some of the things that need to be looked at. Do the building codes need to be updated? Are they overly stringent for safety concerns? You can pull a propane powered vehicle into a building, no problem, but you can't pull a hydrogen vehicle. Where the propane will blow the building apart, the hydrogen might blow the ceiling tiles off. So those are kind of the differences. Okay, that's I think that's the last of my presentation. Questions, answers, anything?
Well, thank you, Alan, for the presentation. Could we put the last slide up with his contact information as well?
The last slide, yes. This is me.
All right, there you go. Thank you for the presentation, Alan. Let's go around the room here. Deus advisory group members, any questions or comments? Bud Rice.
Yes, hi, Alan.
Hello, hi.
Bud Rice. So you started off by saying, yeah, this is kind of a hobby. And and now I'm listening to you and I'm going, wow, what kind of hobby is it? I think, and I like the idea that we're on this topic. But I think what you did today is really like 3 or 4 presentations worth of stuff. Okay. And I think from our perspective, and I'm just going to speak for myself personally, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm at about a 2. Okay. And you're going to have to bring us along, I think, a little bit here. And you're at a 15 on a scale from 1 to 10. You're at a 15. Okay. So we went from generators to alternators. That was a big change for us. We went from points and condensers to electronic ignition. That was a big change for us. And we know that the marketplace is changing. From an industry perspective, we have to understand those changes to the industry and where do we fit in? How's it going to work for us? So as an example, if one of these vehicles shows up on our lot either tomorrow or maybe 3 or 5 years from now, what kinds of things can we do to help service these vehicles for our customers to keep these vehicles on the road? Tires are tires, even though there's a big push to have a California tire. And why is that?
Right.
Well, there's many things that are happening with the the EV vehicles that are forcing a change to the tire. So
Right.
what is that? Okay, but if in fact you're saying, well, there's coolant servicing opportunities here with that, most of the people today are going to go, there's no radiator. What are you talking about? But if in fact it's a cooling mechanism to help protect the batteries that are heating up, and that those vehicles should be serviced, and here's how you would do that, a bunch of people would go, oh, that's interesting. And I might be able to get into that a little bit here. So I guess I'm trying to pat you on the back saying great information, but I'm also trying to encourage you, you gotta bring us along here a little bit.
Yeah, I apologize for the real quick sudden, but I just wanted to give you guys a brief overview. And after I left CDFA, what I have been doing. The little bit of background, my wife's a teacher. She has about another 5 years. And if you ever have a spouse that's a teacher, you have to stay busy because they wonder what you do at home. And, and I have a gardener, so I don't have to mow the lawn. So, but also this is a passion. I was a scientist within the state of California. I left, retired, but I'm a scientist, and that's what I like to do. And this is what interests me. And also the specifications. I visited buildings where people have been living in for the last 5,000 years. So I look at the world's going to be here in 5,000 years. And for the young people, don't worry about the news. The world will be here in 5,000 years. It may be different, but it will be here. So it is part of my effort to make sure that the sustainability of all those stays in place. And that's kind of a commitment. I have a personal commitment to everything. I want to make a mark. I do work with, this is a consensus effort. There's a lot of people that I work with. It's not just me, but thank you. Go ahead.
My hobby is playing tennis. I feel like I got to step up my game. Yeah, I know. Jeez.
Walk 1 hour a day. I do. I have implemented a 1 hour a day walk, and I lost 30 pounds when I left the state. So,
additional questions or comments? Yes. Yes.
I just wanted to make a comment, very informative to tag off of what Bud had mentioned, and I would also welcome more. I tend to be more of a science brain, and I really thought this was extremely informative, and thank you.
Thank you.
well, thank you.
Additional questions, comments? Let's go to the WebEx for advisory group members. I think I saw Joanna Johnson's hand raised. Joanna? Sounds like you're pretty involved in this, part of this.
Yes, indeed. Thank you. Hi, Alan. Great presentation.
Wherever you're at.
Really, really enjoyed it. And I suspect you're going to be doing more of these. I know from the National Conference on Weights and Measures side that we're, a couple of years away in our development process. I'm wondering if the group here would appreciate hearing what you think the timing looks like on the ASTM side.
For the coolants, I currently actually have just closed 4 ballots on the coolants, 2 on the, we call it the glycol-based ones, and 2 on the non-glycol-based ones, or the water one. I have 44 negatives on those coolants, which I'm actually working through. I plan to go back out to ballot for the 2 glycol-based ones within the next week or so, and then hopefully close that before it'll be a concurrent ballot in the subcommittee. As far as the non-glycol based ones, I'm going to go over, and I have a couple meetings scheduled, one in February 7th for the waterless coolant base, and then one on March 9th for the glycol based ones. I'm hoping, keeping my fingers crossed, that I could get something on the books for the glycol based ones the fall of 2024. I never can tell. It's a difficult road thing. We are having within the ASTM D15 in fall 2024 a workshop where we do bring in the various producers, OEMs, and the like. We're trying to get that on sort of ongoing. But I'm working as best I can, Joanna. It's a lot of there's a lot of commercial interests that have delayed some of the standard development that you have to work through. I don't represent anybody. I have no commercial interest, but I deal with a lot of producers, and then the OEMs, as you guys probably find out, they're very tight-lipped. OEMs don't like to tell you anything, and so that's always a challenge.
So you think we're at least a few model years away from a standard?
Well, from the standard perspective, I'm looking again at the fuel cell vehicle standard and the low EC standard. There's currently the Chinese are balloting a national standard that's also equal to our low conductivity standard. That's currently going through being balloted right now. They're looking at a couple of years out before they have that. But I don't know what the implementation will be in the OEMs. My word from some of my colleagues are there's actually OEMs that have their current internal standards already. Trying to get those out in a consensus standard is a challenge, but that's what I'm trying to do. So okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thanks, Alan.
Okay. Again, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, just to open it up for public comments, I think it'll be fairly brief. Anyone in the room? Moderator, can we open it up for public comment on the WebEx?
Absolutely. First, we're going to hear from Christina. And for everyone else, I saw a couple other hands flicker. Now is the time to get those hands up. Do not wait for the current speaker to finish. And Christina's hand went down. Maybe that wasn't.
I hope I didn't bore her to death. So,
Looks like it went back up.
We're gonna try and send her another request to unmute her microphone.
Hey, thank you. I apologize for that. I was trying to bring my hand down, wasn't up the whole time. But my name is Christina Kubran, 352 Innovation. I'm a startup, and one of my passion projects, is helping shops prepare for the clean vehicle stuff. And to address Bud Rice, I wanted to mention that we created Roadmap to the Clean Vehicle World, how to prepare your shop to offer clean vehicle service, that addresses exactly what you were mentioning. We have outlined like what are the common components, how do you service them, what are their needs, their failure modes, the safety, the regulations going on, what's coming down the pipeline, to help them have an idea of what they can do, how to do it safely, and what kind of regulations they're going to be looking at. And it's updated quarterly. And I would like to talk with you offline about a training program I'm working on that is geared for shop owners to be able to start offering some levels of clean vehicle service with minimal infrastructure investment, and to kind of help them sort of dip their toes in the water. So I'd love to get in contact with you about that. And for Alan, as a mechanical engineer who firmly believes that H2I and eventually reach zero emission status. That was the coolest report, and I'm really excited. So I also wanted to ask a couple things for Alan. Are you aware that the Idaho National Lab, the DOE, they did this huge project out in Arizona in the early 2000s where they had blends of natural gas and hydrogen to 100% hydrogen to 100% CNG over a multi-year period, a fleet of vehicles, and some were modified specifically for the fuel, some were just not modified, and they did all this emissions regulation or testing on them and maintenance. Phenomenal. So if you're not aware of it, I'll send you an email with all the reports. They had an entire thing on the plant that they built out in Arizona. They built it specifically to produce hydrogen. They brought in natural gas from the city, and they have a patent on a dispenser where it dispensed the various percent blends and whatnot. So it was a huge amount of information. And Alan, I also wanted to ask if you are a member of ARCHES. If not, I highly recommend you join. ARCHES is the Alliance for Renewable Clean Hydrogen Energy Systems, and it's an agency that California put together that is government, academia, and industry. I'm a proud industry member, and I was going to save this for the end, but I wanted to mention that I think there's a huge opportunity for BAR and ARCHES to work together to ensure that we have like safety standards for hydrogen and maybe fuel cells, but to help really keep the industry as safe as possible and allow everyone opportunities to get trained and educated and go into this new reinvention of transportation. So thank you so much for letting me give a talk, Christine. Oh, and real quick, I put my contact information in the chat for the panelists. So if you didn't get it, let me know. But Christina Kubran, 352 Innovation, thank you so much for letting me talk.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Send me an email, please, okay? And I will, that way I can get in contact with you directly, okay? Well, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Any
it.
other public comments, moderator?
We're going to take a look around. I see a hand up by A. McGee here in the panel.
Hello. Hello.
Oh, yeah, Andrew
here
McGee with the advisory group, yes.
Yep, Andrew McGee from Solano Community College. We're in Vallejo, California. So Alan, yeah, thanks for the presentation. Something that piqued my interest. I see your contact information is on the screen there. I left my hand up so I wouldn't be the guy flickering in the background. Anyway, I did kind of have a question related to what we call these certain fluids. I've had students in my classroom many times say, hey, why do we still call it motor oil when we're dealing with engines, whether they're gasoline or diesel? So I thought that was pretty interesting on Alan's presentation, looking to name certain EV fluids specifically for EVs and such like that. So that's all I got.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will address, if you so desire me to show up again, I'll put together a more directed discussion on each individual topic rather than a shotgun approach. I apologize for that, but thank you.
Thank you. All right, moderator, we can close the public comment period for this presentation.
So that appears to be everything for this presentation. Kenny threw in a comment at the end of the last or the beginning of this presentation for the last one, and wanted to see if we had time to entertain a request for that.
Let me take that up during the public comment portion. Item number 12, public comment on items not on the agenda. I want to get to our break, and we do have several other presentations to get to before the end of the day. So we'll pause and hold that comment. Really try to keep to a schedule here as best we can. But we will get to it under agenda item number 12.
Then that's everything for now.
Okay, let's take our 15-minute bio and other whatever other else you need to take care of break. I'll check into the office. It's 11:37. 15 minutes from now should be 47:52. 11:52. We'll start right back up. The break is a new feature to our meetings. I apologize for the previous meetings where we tried to run right through them, but we do have staff supporting these meetings and can't take a break very easily. So we had to build in a natural break. So I'm glad we were able to accommodate that. Our next presentation is Clay Leak with the Bureau's Executive Office. Clay's the Deputy Chief for Smog Check and Information Services Division. A presentation on the future testing of pre-OBD2 vehicles as it relates to the Smog Check program. This presentation was necessitated by the new legislation, our Sunset Bill, AB 1263, which gave us some authority to think about a different testing strategy and possible network for inspecting this diminishing fleet of vehicles on California roadways. Even with our great weather and everything, we still have a significant number of those vehicles, those pre-OBD2 vehicles, but they are declining. And so we want to present to you some of the information that we have now been given through this newfound legislative authority to take a potentially different approach to the inspections of those vehicles. So Clay, you're up. Good to see you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. As Pat mentioned, my name's Clay Leak. As Pat mentioned, we very recently kind of received some authority to look at a centralized network for the inspection of pre-OBD2 vehicles. So this presentation is really just kind of geared to kind of kick those conversations off, start having some conversations around, you know, what data, what metrics we should be looking at to drive a decision like this. So anyways, let's go ahead and get started. As I mentioned, Assembly Bill 1263 include numerous provisions, including the authorization for BAR to establish a centralized testing network for model year 1995 and older vehicles, that is pre-OBD2 vehicles. In terms of timelines associated with that provision, the date is no earlier than January 1st of 2025. A couple interesting pieces tied in is that the contract must be competitively bid. And there's some specific language that also addresses that it could include subcontracted licensed smog check stations. So what we would call kind of a centralized hybrid network, not necessarily centralized and not necessarily decentralized as well. Also some provisions that authorize BAR to begin testing model year 96 to 99 vehicles using the BAR OBD inspection system. Again, tied to a no earlier than January 1st, 2025. Although these provisions are kind of separate in the legislation for a whole bunch of reasons that we could certainly talk about, kind of see these provisions being somewhat tied together. And we'll talk about why. Next slide, please. So a couple of considerations that kind of led us down this path. You know, the population of older vehicles, AKA pre-1995, is relatively small, roughly 615,000. It does represent a large part of the smog check overall emissions inventory. So from our perspective, continued testing of this population is important to meeting state implementation plan commitments. Certainly stakeholders like Air Resources Board would echo that sentiment. There's a lot of air quality associated with this population of vehicles. So as I mentioned a second ago, you know, shifting the testing of 96 to 99 to the BAR OIS without establishing this alternative centralized hybrid network would likely exacerbate kind of some of the existing problems with that testing network for testing older vehicles. It would provide even less incentive for a lot of STAR stations to maintain their BAR 97 equipment. It would potentially exacerbate challenges for you know, owners of these older vehicles to find a smog check section for their older vehicle. And finally, it would probably very likely increase pressure to exempt this population of vehicles from smog check altogether, which comes with some pretty heavy impacts to air quality. So next slide, please. A few more considerations. Some of these I've touched on already, but I'll go through, you know, from our perspective, establishing this centralized hybrid network and shifting the testing of model year 96 to 99 could benefit both consumers and the smog check industry in terms of overall air quality. The goal would certainly be to help reduce the cost of a BAR 97 inspection for consumers who are seeking inspections of these older vehicles. Could also help to ensure an adequate program area coverage for older vehicles seeking inspection, which is obviously really important to help consumers get a convenient inspection. Potentially could remove burdensome Bar 97 equipment requirements for STAR stations who no longer wish to continue testing these older vehicles. Together, these provisions could also increase the population of vehicles that could be tested on OAS. Obviously, rolling 96 to 99 would increase the number of vehicles that could be tested on the OAS platform. And finally, this proposal could continue to allow a pathway for existing high-performing stations that want to continue doing Bar 97 testing to do that, which I think could be really important in terms of establishing a statewide network that serves consumers in the way it should. So, next slide, please. So today's discussion, I certainly, if we didn't think that this was, something that could kind of benefit both industry and consumers and air quality, it's obviously not something we would have put forward and not something we would have included in Assembly Bill 1263. But ultimately, we are not required to do this, right? We have the authority to implement this on or after January 1st of 2025. So, my goal starting today is to kind of start gathering input. Certainly, there's going to be stakeholders on both sides of this that have pretty strong opinions on why we should or shouldn't. My goal is really to kind of boil that down into some metrics and some criteria. We really try to make data-driven decisions, right? And so my goal starting today is to kind of start having those conversations. What metrics should we be looking at? What data should we be looking at? What criteria should we be looking at as an industry and as a regulatory entity in terms of driving a decision like this forward? Regardless of all that, though, there is a long tail on the implementation of something like this. There's a contract process that would have to occur. So it just kind of for background, implementation of this, a network of this nature would be 2 to 3 years minimum. So we kind of have to look forward a little bit as we have this conversation, because whatever trigger we pull is going to have to be made, kind of far ahead of where we want the implementation date to be. Next slide, please. So some metrics and criteria we kind of brainstormed and just kind of threw out here as a straw man. Obviously the cost of a Bar 97 in today's market continues to go up, and we get complaints from consumers that are seeking Bar 97 inspections and having trouble finding one. But ultimately, the cost of a Bar 97 inspection is, I think, something that we need to take into account. The cost to a consumer. We also need to look ahead. If we were to implement a centralized network, what would the cost of a Bar 97 inspection look like in this centralized hybrid network? If it's 10x of what the cost today, that's probably a non-starter, right? If it's half, then that's probably good data we should be looking at, right, as something to drive this decision forward. So there are mechanisms to gather some of that data. We could put out some RFIs, right? We could look at other programs. So there's ways for us to get some of this data, not that it's exactly apples to apples as compared to what would happen in California, but certainly some data points that we could start putting together. Anecdotally, I think, talking to smog check stations and really getting a feel for their ability and willingness to continue to maintain this Bar 97 equipment and do Bar 97 tests, I think is important. I know we've heard from a lot of smog check stations that just don't want to perform these inspections anymore. And obviously quite a few continue to do so because of the tie to STAR, right? I mean, is the reality, right? So another thing I think we should be looking at is test volumes. Bar 97 test volume across STAR and non-STAR. There's some more data that I think could help drive this decision. Obviously, we need to keep an eye on that population of older vehicles. Pat mentioned it is a declining population of vehicles, but not declining at a really rapid rate. And the reality is vehicles last a long time in California, and there's definitely a segment of the population that enjoys driving these older vehicles and probably will continue to drive these older vehicles for some time. So I think, the characteristics of those vehicles and the number of them out there, and obviously the contribution to the emissions inventory is additional data we need to be taken into consideration as part of this decision. Finally, I think we should be looking at consumer complaints relative to the ability to obtain a Bar 97 inspection. I've kind of touched on this a couple times already, but again, it's not perfect data, but if we're getting 1,000 complaints a month about consumers not being able to find an inspection for their vehicle, that's relevant data. That's something we should be looking at. So next slide, please. So that's it. I guess, big picture, I see the centralized hybrid network proposal as something that could really benefit consumers. I think it could benefit air quality. I think it could benefit industry. But in terms of, when we pull the trigger and what this looks like exactly, I think that's something we want to get as much input on from as many stakeholders as possible before we pull the trigger. So my contact information is up here. I'm, the second this slide presentation that went up on the website, I started getting feedback from a whole bunch of people, as you could probably imagine. And, I think my challenge to all the stakeholders that are interested in this issue is, I certainly value people's opinion, but I want to have conversation about real data and real metrics and the real world impacts of what we're doing, and kind of try to remove some of the emotion and opinions and really look at the data and some quantitative metrics that can help us drive something positive for everybody. So.
Thank you, Clay. That was a brief presentation. Appreciate that, and got through it pretty quickly to move on to questions and comments from the advisory group members and the public. Anyone? Bud Rice?
All right, Bud Rice, thank you, Clay. A couple things. Let me talk about this from a shop's perspective, okay? They do have a declining number of vehicles that they're testing in that group. And then they're making a decision as to whether or not it makes sense for them to keep paying for the equipment versus the number of vehicles they're getting, and where do the two lines meet. And so that's an issue. The other one is, if you're speaking with the equipment manufacturers, maintaining a bar 97 equipment is also difficult. It's old technology, and they have difficulty just getting replacement parts to put into those machines. From an emission perspective, and I'm going back to when I was on the IMRC, older vehicles pollute more than newer vehicles, right? So even though the number of those vehicles that are on the street, California has more because of the environment and the weather, they can last longer, but a bunch of the emissions that are attributed to vehicles are with those older vehicles as well. So we have a tendency to start trying to figure out how to knock vehicles off of a list, when really the answer is we got to be putting those vehicles onto the list, because they're the ones that are doing the most polluting. The other thing that happens is, if you're a star station that can do repairs and fix these older vehicles, you have to make sure that the internet gods that keep track of your star score is within the range that lets you maintain your star certification. And if in fact you have a vehicle in there that's failing, and you're speaking with the consumer about why their car is failing, and let's just assume for argument's sake that cylinder number 6 has a fouled spark plug because there's a lot of miles on this engine, and so you're talking to them about replacing the spark plugs and doing some maintenance to get the emissions to go back down, and they say, well, can I just get something to get me to pass? And if you put a new spark plug in cylinder number 7, it's going to drop the emissions down, and it's likely that car is going to then meet the criteria. If I do that, then he hits a roadside check 8 months from now, and now cylinder number 4 is starting to plug up, and now they're coming back at me going, hey, you just passed this car and he's failing. I go, well, what am I supposed to do about that? It's an older car. So there has to be some criteria. A lot of these things have to be added into the mix. One is, those vehicles pollute the most. They ought to be checked the most. Then if we're going to be doing some things, we're trying to keep them in play for the consumer. How do we do that but not get a score that affects me at the same time? And how do we do enough of them that makes it an economic criteria match for the equipment that we're going to have in place? So I just thought I'd lay all that out there for you, Clay. Thank you.
I totally understand and appreciate all those problems from the shop perspective. And, I'll be totally honest. I think this proposal could alleviate a lot of those problems, in addition to potentially alleviating some problems for consumers as well, all while preserving the air quality benefits associated with inspecting those vehicles. So yeah, I totally understand and appreciate all those concerns. And I think those are definitely things that we've thought about as part of this proposal. One of the metrics I'll tell you we look at the percentage of smog check stations that have bar 97 equipment that do less than 1 per month. There's a lot. but they maintain that equipment, right? Because they want to maintain their STAR certification. So there's a cost associated with maintaining that equipment, right? If you had a centralized network with fewer pieces of equipment that were doing higher volume inspections, theoretically, you reduce the cost per inspection, right? That benefits the consumer and the industry. So those are all things I think we want to start measuring and looking at and making sure we're making the right decision for the industry and for consumers and for air quality. But those are tough factors to balance, right? As kind of to your point, yeah.
Thank you, Bud. Thank you, Clay, for the response. Additional questions? Yes, Jeff Cox.
Jeff Cox, Automotive Maintenance and Repair Association. Yeah, to kind of go off of what Bud was saying, maybe there's a ratio of stations based on car park that those shops that do invest in the equipment and to keep things running, that it's in their best interest because you could feed enough cars to them to make it worth their while. So maybe there's a ratio that you could figure out and say across the state we're going to have, based on the number of the car park, we're going to have X amount of stations and then let people apply to be one of those stations.
Yeah, appreciate the idea. Yeah, thanks.
We'll go to the far, Larry. Yeah.
Sorry. I'm wondering if we did end up with a centralized station for the older cars, how you envision a failed smog being repaired. Because if we're getting rid of the 97 machines at a lot of locations, then if you are a smog repair station and you get a failed smog that was failed off-site somewhere else, step one is to perform a smog and see how it fails. You can't go off their numbers. I kind of see a bit of a hiccup there where you go to a centralized thing, everybody gets rid of their old equipment, and then there's no one to fix these cars reliably if they do have a failed smog issue.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, I don't know that I've thought about it from the perspective of test versus test and repair, but obviously there's a lot of test only stations out there. Our vision of the centralized network was to basically function as kind of a test only station. So, the repair of those vehicles, I think there's still going to be a market for that. In terms of verifying the repairs were done correctly, that's an interesting point. Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah, I mean, currently the law is that if you are doing a failed smog diagnostic, step one is to make sure it actually fails and someone didn't check it with the coolant not warmed up or something.
Sure. Yeah.
That's where a hybrid facility that's doing test and repair, meaning an existing license station under this plan could be of value.
Yeah, potentially some of the privately owned stations kind of tied into this network could be test and repair as well. So if that was a service the consumer was seeking, that those stations still could potentially be available as part of this model.
A really good comment.
Yeah, that's an
Matt.
interesting.
We hadn't thought of that, but that is something that we do need to take into consideration, where these vehicles get repaired and how you validate that the repairs are going to be effective and lead to a passing inspection. Yes, Ruben.
So thank you for your presentation. One thing is that Bud knows this, that a repair facility doesn't require smog equipment, right? If I'm a repair station, I don't have to have a dyno. I don't even have to have a forward gas analyzer. So in the future, right? If there was a centralized testing, what could occur is that there could be repair only stations. There's very few in the state of California, which surprises me because you'd think that people would jump on that, right? To be a repair station only. I always tell my students, if I was in the repair industry, that's what I would do. I would be a repair only. I wouldn't have to have any specialized equipment really, except for what a regular automotive repair shop would have. So that would solve the equipment problem. What I'm getting at, what I want to know on, all this is going to matter about data, right? One is there data to support that centralized testing would work? I know that back there used to be, I think there used to be some videos out about how centralized testing failed miserably, like in Canada and other places. So I'd like to, if we could get some data on how it has worked or what we would base that off of. Also data on, I'm curious that you say that, a lot of shops or consumers are complaining about not being able to get their vehicles tested. And I do bar update in the Central Valley, namely in the Stanislaus Valley area. And the technicians slash shop owners over there say, heck, we want to smog those cars, right? They want to keep it's a revenue to them. I've yet to hear a lot of negativity from shop owners and technicians not wanting to repair them. It's work, right? It's work that they want to do. So that's also some interesting data that I'd like to see to support that as well. So those two things about the centralized testing is that the way I look at it, centralized testing will kind of reduce the amount of availability of shops, right? It seems to make the areas less and less frequent. And I would think that many, if not, many shop owners slash technicians would balk at not being able to repair those vehicles. I would think that more work, is better for the industry. But again, data is what matters here. So if we could, maybe, I'll get a hold of you. You could, maybe provide that, or we could, start looking at some of that. That would be helpful. Also to encourage or to take back to the technicians and tell them why we're doing this, right? This is why we're doing this, because, consumers are complaining. We're doing this because, according to, somebody, shops don't want to do this work anymore, because right now, like I said, I look at the industry, and most of the industry, as far as, again, from what the area that I see it, want to continue doing these tests. So that's what I got.
Yeah, appreciate the comment. Certainly, there's a lot of centralized programs across the United States and Europe that we keep an eye on, and lots of data available around how those programs charge and what the charge is, and different vendors that support those programs. Certainly, the vision would be to have a network that is convenient for consumers, and they're not traveling, hours and hours to get a smog check inspection. But yeah, absolutely look forward to touching base and looking at some of those metrics.
I appreciate the feedback and input, Ruben, on this. I mean, because I don't get that. Most of the complaints I get from the industry are, how can I be star without doing bar 97? That's it, over and over and over again.
And, with regard to consumers, coming forth and saying they can't find an inspection, I mean, I'm sure there's consumers that legitimately can't find a shop, or a shop that's close, and there's others that are probably just looking to get out of their smog check, right? So I'm not sure how many of those are which and what, but in general, yes, we are able to find a shop. At this point in time, we're willing to find a shop that's willing to service those consumers.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Robinette?
Yeah, just a quick question about that as well. Seems like it's a supply and demand question. It's as well as a regulatory and compliance question, right? So in the data we now have, if there is any, with those cars that fall into that older category and have the emission issues that we're talking about, is there a way to generate a heat map to see where that is and where those cars are and where those shops are employed in relation to the need and all that? It might inform maybe an optimum of where and who, and a few things. Just an idea to gather more data points on what optimum looks like. Depending on what your parameter might be.
Sure.
Supply and demand. Yep. No, I like that. That's we have used heat maps for other program rollouts. Primarily in the past, we want to make sure before we roll out the OIS, right, that we have enough geographic coverage across California to service the need. So we have used heat maps for program implementations like that in the past. So yeah, that's something we could look at. It's not quite as clean looking at vehicles versus where stations are located, but certainly something we could look at. Yeah, thanks.
Let me get new folks. Mr. Kusa?
Thank you. So I think the distribution of the model years, obviously, there's way more 95s than there are 76s. In the model year distribution, probably is going to be my guess. So, there's having a very nice lady that had grandma's 84 Omni that she kept on the road forever and ever, right? There's two reasons people own those cars. One is it's grandma's car and it's the last thing they have. The other one's the only one they can afford to drive, right? They can't buy a new car. So we're seeing less and less shops. Ruben, has information from what he has, but more and more shops are not touching 95 and back. So that's a problem. We just had a big conversation on Team Talk with ASCCA a couple months ago about, not being able to get the bar 97 machine fixed. So they don't want to fix them because they can't get the equipment or the replacement parts for it. So that's a problem. Forgot what my other problem was. Oh, parts. getting parts for that 84 Omni was really hard. So those are the challenges with fixing them. We do fix them. And, as a repair only station, we can, right? So, but as Ruben said, right, surprisingly how few repair only stations are. So maybe a part of this would be make 95 and back, exempt from repair only, so that when it is a centralized test only, where do I get my car fixed? Well, nobody wants to fix it because they're not repair only, or they're test and repair and they don't want to fix it, right? So I'll fix it, if after a conversation with the customer, but if I'm not repair only, then maybe I don't want to take that risk of, flying outside of regulations. So that might be a helpful to the consumer to get the car repaired.
Yeah, interesting idea. I like that. The one point I appreciate, a lot of the shop owners you've been talking to aren't interested in testing these older vehicles. And Ruben, your point that a lot are. I mean, that was really the idea behind this provision, that privately owned shops could become part of this hybrid centralized network, right? So you could give a carrot to the shops that want to continue doing that work, and those that don't could continue doing STAR inspections on newer vehicles, right?
Yeah.
Kind of to accommodate both stakeholder groups as flexibly as possible. So that was the idea. But certainly understand there are some that are and some that don't. So
Right.
Certainly different perspectives that we want to address as much as we can.
We'll go back to Matt.
I forgot to mention this earlier, just a quick anecdotal thing. I lived in Colorado for a couple of years, and the way that their smog worked was they had like a trailer they'd park on on-ramps, and as you drove by, it would sniff your tailpipe. And there was some stipulation, if you passed twice in a certain amount of time or whatever, they just send you a renewal form, and that was good enough for them. I mean, maybe way out in left field, I have no idea, but it was awesome as just a person driving a car around to, they sniffed it, it was good, you passed, and you don't have to deal with going to a centralized station or a shop or anything.
Yeah, there are some technologies out there that do that. Call it clean screening and dirty screening as vehicles drive by and either fail or pass. That is a program feature that some jurisdictions leverage. Not something we've used in California for some pretty good reasons, but certainly a technology that is out there. Yeah.
Any advisory group members on the WebEx? Okay. Can I go to public comment? Any? Yes. Please introduce yourself. Green button? Yeah, green light.
Jim Todd, my curiosity was 615,000 of these older vehicles. Is that statewide registrations, 52 counties? Or is that simply the vehicles that are in biennial testing?
I don't know that I could answer that question. I would have to phone a friend, which is my chief of engineering in the back of the room, Garrett Torgerson, ran those numbers. I don't know if Garrett, if you have any idea.
So that brings
All
the-
vehicles in the state was the answer from the back.
So that brings the question of a number of those cars are in attainment counties where transfer of ownership is the test du jour. How are you going to get to them? How are you going to test the people that don't need a test in order to be sure they're getting any cleaner? I mean, the premise of what we're talking about is how do we help the biennial folks? I would assert that quite possibly almost half of the vehicles in that 615 don't get a test until they need a new owner. Okay.
Yeah, we could certainly look. It's an interesting point. I hadn't asked that question yet, but we should certainly consider that when we look at
That's a
that
good point.
population
I
of
didn't
vehicles.
hear the response from the back.
Oh, the response was the vast majority are in biennial areas, not change of ownership.
Not change of ownership. Okay.
So the getting to the other transfer of ownership people, would that require a change in the SIP? Splitting 96 and 99 and moving them up, would that require a change in the SIP? I don't know the rules of the SIP well enough.
I don't either. I would have to phone a friend from ARB.
We know a few
Unfortunately,
people
they're
who do
not
know
here
that.
today.
Yeah, we'll talk to Cal.
But yeah, absolutely.
California
The SIP
Resources Board.
considerations are something that we would engage ARB on as part of any proposal, and would certainly take the SIP
I mean,
into
we're
account.
now asking the federal government to step in and help us change the problem. And that's going to add an extra layer of complication, I think. Just me thinking.
Yeah, good point.
All valid points. This is why we wanted to get some input early.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim. Any other public comment in the room? Moderator, could we go to public comment on the WebEx participants?
No hands yet, but now is the time. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users, *3 is how you raise your hand. And for our mobile users, there's 3 different screens when only one of them has a hand button. Tap the ellipses button, that ... at the bottom of your screen, and figure out which one. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request. Seeing no request, it might be safe to continue.
Thank you very much. Seeing no additional hands, we will close this agenda item. Thank you. Stay tuned.
Yeah,
And
thank you
feel
guys
free
very
to
much.
reach out to Clay if you have some additional thoughts that you have that you want to share with us. We are all ears.
Yeah, great input. Really appreciate it, and look forward to further conversations. Thanks.
Thank you, Clay. All right, moving right along. Our next presenter is Paul Hedgeland, one of our air quality engineers with our bar engineering and research branch to give us an update on California Vehicle Inspection System, otherwise known as CalViz. Hi, Paul.
Good morning.
Afternoon, but who's counting?
Afternoon, maybe. All right, California Vehicle Inspection System update. So we do this every third bag meeting roughly. So let's go ahead with the next slide. So over the last 6 months, we had a number of accomplishments. We refreshed our secondary data center and moved it from San Diego to Vacaville with very little notice of the San Diego data center closing. That was a big effort. We updated the bar OS software. It was a 23.1 release, and that included updated messaging, bar messaging on the vehicle inspection report, and improved self-diagnostics instructions for the equipment. It also added unsupported Microsoft operating system version warning messages. That was to get people off the old Windows 7 and 8 software. And lastly, in that release were new database tables created in support of the future vehicle safety systems inspection program. So following that release, the 23.2 release, that's where the start of the vehicle safety systems inspection functionalities added into the software. So on the main menu of the software, there's a new button for vehicle safety systems inspections. Also, managed station functions were added in support of the safety inspection. Both of these functions are currently disabled until the program starts in Q2 this year. We also quit supporting older Microsoft Windows operating system versions on the bar OS computers. And the reason, I'll cover this in the next slide or two, but it's to get our code updated to a modern code base, basically. All right, next slide, please. The 23.3 release, that's where the main menu changed. It has now both the bar OIS for smog check and the bar SIS, safety inspection system function for the vehicle safety systems inspections. Also a rebranding, you could call it, or renaming of the software. So because we have safety coming, we can no longer call this the bar OS software. We had to call it the CalViz software. So CalViz software includes both smog and safety. So you'll see that name sprinkled throughout the software in the online help and also through our public website and questions and answers. All right, next slide, please. So looking ahead, we're currently testing a 23.4 release, and that's to support the licensing and station enrollment activities for the safety inspection. That release will be out just before we may start on the earliest date for the licensing activities for safety. And then following that, there's a 24.1 release, and that includes any remaining updates for the safety inspection itself, plus online help for navigating and using the software. And then after the safety program updates, we have additional changes. We call them change requests. So this last bullet on the slide is about now that we have modern Microsoft Windows operating systems on the computers, we can modernize the code base that's being used. So that's what that update's about. And the next slide, please. We also have to update our primary data center like we did with the San Diego to Vacaville effort. That will include a complete hardware refresh and operating system update. It's a big effort. The second bullet, we were going to do a change in the software to allow us to capture a visual inspection of the mill light on OBD vehicles without plugging in the OBD to collect data. And the reason for that is Unified Diagnostic Services vehicles are coming, and our current DADs won't talk to those vehicles. So this would have been a stopgap measure just to collect the mill light only, but really it's not worth expending the effort and resources for this change because there's so few of these vehicles. They're going to transition with one make model vehicle in 24 and then 25, 26, maybe 27 will be 100% of the vehicles. So we've got time. So we're just going to wait until the DAD 2.0 units are certified to actually plug in and collect the OBD data on these vehicles. So in the meantime, we can adjust the BarOS software to bypass the entire OBD test for these vehicles. The last item here is to update the BarOS software to integrate the next generation DAD, the DAD 2.0 device. We've got a lot of work to do there in that area. And next slide, I think that's it. There's my contact information if you have any questions.
Thank you, Paul. We like to have you come twice a year to give us updates. There's always a lot of moving parts to the smog check background support for the program, I should say. And so it's good for us to share that information with everyone, we feel. So any questions, comments from advisory group members? How about on the WebEx? I don't see any hands raised. You might get off scot-free here. Any, that's the whole genius in bringing you back twice a year. It just becomes kind of routine for everyone. All right, let's see, any public comment? Okay, moderator, can we see if any public comment on the WebEx?
Currently, there are no requests. We're going to give people just a few seconds.
Sure.
So if you'd like to raise your hand to make a comment, do so now. Tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand. And our mobile users, tap that ellipses button, the ... to find the correct screen where your hand button is.
Yeah.
Seeing no request, do you wish to continue?
Thank you, moderator. We'll close this agenda item out. Thank you, Paul. We'll see you 2 meetings from now. Thank you. Our next, and I think our final presentation. Yes, this is it. We've got some handouts. We'll open it up for comment in just a minute and have the public comment on items not on the agenda. But before we get to that, our final presentation is from Bill Thomas, Deputy Chief for Field Operations and Enforcement Division at BAR. He's in our BAR Executive Office. This is another complaint case study that we felt very interesting, one that got elevated all the way to the director's office. And it was a complex one, but I think it resolved very satisfactorily. I like to call, well, I did not call it these. As you might recall, Bud Rice a few meetings ago was asking, why don't we ever hear from Bill Thomas and hear some of his bedtime stories? So these are, whenever I'm
No,
looking for.
it was story time with Bill
Oh,
Thomas.
okay,
That's
maybe
what
it was story time.
Story
Okay,
time with Bill
sorry,
Thomas.
story time. So I said, now I've butchered the title of what you were calling it, but now I always, when we're looking for agenda items, I always say, Bill, do you have a bedtime story we can do for BAG? And we are here. That's where we are. So Bill is going to give us a complaint case study, this one that we recently encountered. I will say this before Bill presents. I really like these, and I know you did as well, because it kind of, government should be transparent. I mean, there's certain things we can't share with you, but there are things we can talk about that have been resolved without naming names, without naming vehicles or shops. And I think that's really good for all of us to be able to come together and kind of get a kind of a learning opportunity, if you will. So I'm glad we're doing this and have committed to doing this at these meetings. So thank you and welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, Advisory Group, for allowing me to come up and share story time with Bill. I want to rename it. I was talking with somebody in the audience and had mentioned Bill's bedtime story because that is the name we have around the office. And we kind of figured that may not be appropriate. Our HR division might want to talk about. However, coffee with Bill. Coffee with Bill, because like I said last time, these are wake-up stories for both. And on this one, for bar staff watching, the staff involved with this complaint will recognize it. And it's a wake-up call for them because there were some missed opportunities early on in this complaint that could have kept it from getting to the Director of Consumer Affairs or the Department of Consumer Affairs Executive Office. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. Or the first slide. However, before I go into my coffee time with Bill, I want to point out a change that was made to our website a few weeks back, and quite without much, pomp and circumstance. We just made a subtle little change there. We have removed the addresses and phone numbers for all of our field offices. And this is consistent with the modern age of reach out to us electronically. The days we don't sell certificates, booklets in the field offices anymore, like the early days of smog checks. So you don't need to run down to your local bar field office and buy a book of certs so you continue performing smog checks. There's an email address, preferred method of communication, and a centralized phone number if you need any assistance, service from any of the 12 bar field offices, just reach out to that. I don't want to say don't come see us. We certainly welcome our stakeholders, consumers and industry, but we can often save a trip, one more car off the roadway driving down from an auto repair facility to a bar field office. So that's on our website under Contact Us. Next to it is the Industry Help Desk. A lot of those visits to the field office were to resolve smog check issues, and so the Industry Help Desk remains available for you. And again, they have an email as well. We have staff monitoring that, working hours all day long, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, and those are routed immediately upon receipt. So just wanted to call attention to that.
I'm glad you did. I just noticed that we had a slight update or a recent update. The Irvine field office moved to Santa Ana, so we'll take care of that on the webpage.
Well, yeah, there's no address there, so.
No, I know. but still.
Well, no, we're still going to call it Irvine, and
Are we?
there's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well,
all right.
I could go into a long spiel about
That's another story.
about acronyms in our
right.
database and so forth, but that's not on the agenda, and
Okay.
so it wasn't publicly noticed, so we won't talk about that. So we'll go to the slide for the presentation. First slide, next slide. So background, the repair history of this vehicle, and I'll try and keep everybody, try not to confuse everybody, but it can get confusing. There were 2 repair facilities involved and 3 repair transactions. And so let's keep that in mind. So an alternator in fall of 22 was replaced at the first ARD. Shortly there, well, not shortly thereafter, in spring of 23, the charge light, the warning indicator on the dash, illuminated. Real quick, earlier it was mentioned that a car went through a brake and lamp inspection with the dash lit up by like a Christmas tree. That should fail in VSSI, by the way. There is a light check. Just wanted to, anyway, back to the presentation. I meant to mention that before I started this and not get sidetracked. Second, ARD recommended an alternator to solve the charge light. They replaced the alternator, but the light remained illuminated. A battery sensor was replaced and a harness connector repaired, and this is in transaction number 2. Shortly thereafter, within days, so after repairing the replacing the battery sensor and the harness connector, they returned the vehicle to the consumer. The consumer drove, and it was in 20, 30, 40 miles, the charge light re-illuminated. Went back to the second ARD, and they replaced the entire engine harness, and that repaired the problem. The consumer filed the complaint with us while it was in for the third repair transaction, the second repair at the second ARD. Next slide, please. So the complaint was filed against the first ARD because they originally replaced the alternator. The bar representative reviewed the documentation from all 3 transactions, determined 3 separate repair transactions had taken place, and there were multiple compliance concerns identified at both locations. Things where the Automotive Repair Act and regulations could have been followed a little bit better. Next slide, please. So we'll go back to the first transaction. In our review of the paperwork, we determined that the alternator and starter had both been replaced on this vehicle at the first ARD. This was a consumer request towed in. I don't know if they'd had it tested at a parts facility that tests electrical systems, a roadside service or what, but it was a consumer request for alternator and starter. The bar determined through its investigation, and also you'll come to find out the second ARD as well, that the incorrect alternator had been installed. A manual transmission application had been installed on an automatic transmission vehicle. On this particular make, model, year vehicle, the alternator for the automatic transmission has an overrunning clutch to allow it to slip and freewheel when alternator speed exceeds engine speed. Yes. Ostensibly, that's to reduce, the manufacturer of the vehicle says to reduce noise, vibration, and harshness. So the manual transmission alternator is a solid pulley vehicle, a solid pulley alternator with no overrunning clutch. That's the only difference between the two. So you hopefully those of you who repaired cars, you're starting to go, well, wait a second here. Why is that so? It's bad because it's not the correct application, but it shouldn't lead to a charge light. Next slide, please. The second ARD recommended alternator replacement due to incorrect application. The technician identified that it was missing the required overrunning clutch for an automatic transmission. However, they put the alternator on, and at this point determined the battery sensor was not generating the correct signal, meaning it was showing low voltage still, even after the alternator replacement. And I would assume the light was on, but that wasn't documented on the estimate or invoice. They recommended a sensor replacement. Upon replacement of the sensor, identified a broken connector and attempted to repair that connector at this. So it was a harness side connector of the battery sensor, harness side of the battery sensor connector. Say that 3 times fast. Illuminated charge light was resolved for the moment by these repairs. Next slide, please. So shortly after leaving the second ARD, after the first repair at the second ARD, but the second repair of this event, the charge light re-illuminated. The second ARD determined the connector repair had failed and recommended harness replacement. The consumer authorized the harness replacement. The consumer the customer retrieved the vehicle and paid $2,300 for repairs at the second ARD. They had paid 6 to 800 at the first ARD. I forget what the exact number was. Customer requested the first ARD provide a full refund of all money spent at the second ARD. And I'll get to why the customer requested that in just a moment here. Based upon BAR's determination that the incorrect alternator was installed, the first ARD offered to refund the amount spent on just the alternator, which was a little over $500. It was, yes, we installed the wrong part, so we'll refund the money for that, parts and labor for that part. The consumer felt the refund amount was insufficient. They were looking for $2,300. They were only being offered $500. Declined the settlement offer. Next slide, please. Review of the invoice from the second ARD displayed the statement, voltage spikes from the incorrect alternator caused the battery sensor and harness to fail. Are you all with me on that statement? Show of hands, how many agrees that's a reasonable statement and possible? Okay, thank you. We were going to have to talk afterwards, and I was going to bring some of my enforcement people over if anybody raised their hands. The invoice never listed alternator test results. So the premise of replacing the alternator was the overrunning clutch. And then the statement put on there was, I don't know, maybe just to kind of support replacement of the alternator. The customer based their decision, as is reasonable, to decline the settlement offer from the first ARD based upon that statement. So here a customer has an invoice that says, all of your problems were caused by this bad alternator. So I want $2,300 because all of my problems, I had to spend $2,300 because you put the wrong part on. That's the message of the first ARD. First ARD said, no, that ain't reasonable. And so the customer was disadvantaged by one little statement on an invoice, a false and misleading statement. Therein lies the violation of the Automotive Repair Act. The statement made by the second ARD negatively influenced the customer's ability to make an informed decision. Next slide. During the complaint investigation, the bar representative, see, it gets better, there's more. I should have said, but wait, there's more. The bar representative interviewed the second ARD's technician who stated he performed the alternator replacement, battery sensor replacement, and attempted to repair the connector. During the connector repair, he determined the battery hold down was missing. Okay, so now I think we're all thinking, well, battery's sliding around now, it's not held in place. This is what led to our harness damage, the harness damage. He determined the hold down was likely the cause of the sensor and connector failure. This information is not written down anywhere. This is just the information the technician provided the bar representative during an interview during a complaint investigation. This technician did not replace the harness. I don't think it was above his or her pay grade. But it was another technician at the second ARD. Next slide, please. Bar inspected, we still had a lot of questions. So the field office supervisor and the representative went out and inspected the vehicle. By this time, it had already made its way to the consumer was getting the runaround, and so had made it to the department, to the director of the department. And so that's why I instructed the supervisor to go out and assist in the inspection. There was not an aftermarket hold down. The technician had said he had put an aftermarket hold down or any hold down on the vehicle. However, we checked the battery. It was the correct application, where there's also concern and a statement made that maybe the incorrect terminal location was installed and had overly stretched the wires. It did have the correct battery in it, and there was sufficient flex in the new harness not to cause damage to it. It still should have a hold down, but that wasn't. There was now, the correct alternator was now installed. There is no evidence that the alternator was defective other than the incorrect pulley application. As a gesture of goodwill and due to the false and misleading statements made by employees, the second ARD refunded the entire amount, over the $2,300 spent at their facility. Next slide, please. Moral of the story. It's not the easiest thing in the world I've been on the other side of the counter and spoke with consumers. You got to be honest with them. Don't make up things to sugarcoat it or to justify things that you're not sure about. Be honest and with consumers, even if it's bad news. And that's why it's coffee time with Bill. It's a wake-up call. You have to be straight with them. Good information or bad, if they have that information, they can make informed repair decisions. And I think that's it.
Very good. I know when I reviewed this presentation, it was like, follow the bouncing ball. And I was like, is this the first ARD or the second ARD, Bill? And I was like, overly, I don't know, concerned about making sure we were clear on that. And I hope it was. We went overboard maybe on making sure it was clear which ARD was involved in which part of the transaction, the entire transaction. So thank you for bearing with me, Bill, in that review process, because I was scratching my head. Who's on first type of scenario. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I have a feeling you'll want to say something on this. So I will look to you first, Bud
Thank you.
Rice.
Thank you very much. First thing is what you left off at the very beginning, it might have been slide number 2. The car was towed in and the customer requested that they replace the alternator and the starter. What if it was their part? What if it was their part?
It was not.
It was not, yeah, but I'm
We
just saying.
we reviewed
Check
parts
that.
invoices.
Yeah.
It was a purchase by the facility,
The
but
facility.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
though.
that's, man, that could have been.
It could have been the
really-
case, yeah, but it wasn't, yeah.
Second thing, Bill, this is exactly what I was hoping for when you were starting to do these things, that in many cases, the stories last longer than us coming and doing a presentation here. We can go back and go, well, wait till you hear what happened to this other shop. And now those stories can live on as we tell them over and over again. So this is exactly what I was hoping for. So good job.
glad I was able to deliver on the expectation.
Missing the coffee, that's all.
Yes.
Lou Hanapolsky.
Hi, Bill.
Hi, Lou. Good to see you back.
A couple of quick questions. Was this case referred to the Attorney General's office? Or were you able to?
I'm not at liberty to discuss
Okay.
any continuing aspects of this.
Okay,
complaint.
fair enough, fair enough. You said that there was missed opportunities on Barr's part on this. What opportunities did Barr miss out on this case?
Well, when I mentioned that we didn't take the opportunity to inspect the consumer's vehicle early on in the complaint process. So that aspect. And then other follow-up efforts by the Bureau that I can't discuss.
Okay, all right. So a couple observations for you, or actually for everybody. This is a good example of Barr mediating or trying to mediate a consumer complaint. Notice that what the customer wanted, the consumer wanted $2,300 refund. Obviously, you were eventually able to get that for the consumer, it looks like from here. But assume in this circumstance that neither shop wanted to offer any money at all to the consumer, so you had something to work with. The first shop offered $500. Okay. The consumer said, no, that's not enough money. It's $2,300. Okay. So for what, another $1,800, the consumer could have been satisfied. And assume both shops said, no, we're not going to do that. Here's what shops don't realize. That will turn out to be a cost-effective resolution for the shop. Shop may not want to pay the money, but the alternative is Barr will likely, and you don't need to tell me what happened in this case, but if the Barr does refer the case to the Attorney General's office for prosecution, that $2,300 offer that could have been obtained early on in the case is going to pale by comparison to what the shop's going to pay to get out of this case, either by a ultimate resolution through settlement or a resolution through an adjudicated judgment, so to speak. So the moral of the story also is be careful what you wish for, because if if you work with the bar, which is to say work with the consumer and the bar to resolve the case, more times than not, it will be cost effective for the shop to do that, because the alternative is that the shop is going to be it will end up spending much more time and money to get out of the situation that it finds itself in.
Excellent points. Thank you, Lou.
Thank you, Lou. Any others down the row? Let's go this way. Yes, Ruben Parra.
So in a case like this, wouldn't that shop receive a citation?
Again, at this point, I'm not at liberty to discuss. But certainly that would be on the table. There were violations of the act by both parties,
Yeah.
both shops.
Because again, a lot of it has to do with just, technician education and, proper documentation. I'll have to argue for the industry and say that most shops are not, out there trying to gouge the customer, the consumer. Most are just trying to make a living, and lack of proper documentation, lack of proper training is usually the culprit, not, the shop being facetious.
That's almost word for word a quote I make in staff meetings frequently, is that 95% of our licensee population are just people trying to earn a living and feed their families, and to keep that in mind. And I will point out here that although the consumer wanted the full refund, well, no, I'll if anybody wants to talk to me after the meeting, we can.
Dave Kusa.
Thank you for the coffee time, Bill.
You're
fun.
welcome.
So more
So
comment.
next time I should bring in one of those,
Bring in a big old,
those
like a
coffee shop.
Starbucks things.
I wasn't
Yeah.
going to mention
Yeah,
any
correct.
brand names. No
Correct.
free
So-
advertising at
Okay,
that.
sorry. Local coffee shop, Canberra.
Yes, a carafe. Yes.
So if I understood the first part, the alternator and starter replacement was the customer said replace my alternator and starter.
Yes.
Right. So just a comment, it just astonishes me how many shops will do that. Nobody would go to their doctor and say, take out my appendix, or their dentist pull my tooth, and they would say no. Right. So, unless in here is why.
Right.
Did you actually need a starter, right? Or an alternator? The thing could have been totally mitigated if the shop had just done, no, we need to figure out what's wrong with your car.
Right. The correct response should have been, well, first of all, what are your symptoms? What are you experiencing? Obviously, it's been towed in. How long has this been going on? So forth. And how about we do an electrical system
Right. It's
diagnosis
probably all
first?
related to that
And then-
battery sensor to start with. There's
and
probably
then
nothing else
and then
wrong with the car.
Right. And the battery sensor and harness failure were not caused by either of the ARB.
Exactly.
And were necessary repairs.
Right.
That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah.
I found a better way to say it.
Yeah.
So-
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Additional comments from advisory group members. We'll go to WebEx. I don't see any hands raised. Moderator, am I missing anyone?
You are not missing anyone.
All right, we'll open this up for public comment, either in the room or moderator on the WebEx on this presentation.
All right, once you've cleared the room, we have people on WebEx.
You can move to that. We didn't see any hands raised here in the room.
All right, we're going to start with Christina, and we may end there. Christina, we're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you so much for letting me speak again. I've been very vocal today, but I'm excited to share my knowledge and in the advancement for the better of everyone. And I see a huge opportunity here with the reinvention of transportation for BAR and whatever other agencies, maybe working with ASE, Society of Automotive Engineers. Now, I don't know. I don't know the details. I'm happy to work behind the scenes to help figure that out because I want to help advance everything for the better. I used to work, I'm an engineer, I'm a mechanical engineer, and I used to work in nuclear power. There is a procedure for everything. Now, I'm not saying write a procedure for everything, but we have a huge opportunity here with this reinvention of these cars that nobody really knows how they work because the people that design them, to create some procedures that could help shops walk through a troubleshooting or text to help shops be better prepared to service these cars that are so brand new and so 180 from everything they've ever known. And I think BAR is in a position to help more standardize the industry. And then that would improve consumer confidence. Consumers can, be more confident that their car is going to get repaired correctly the first time. And I don't know, I see an opportunity here, and I would love to help make it better if I can. Thank you so much for letting me ramble a little bit. Christina Kubrin, 352 Innovation.
All right, thank you, Christina. Anyone else, moderator?
We're going to take a quick look around, but the answer so far is no.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Great presentation, good feedback from everyone, and we'll look to do it again. We'll just, when we see one that's kind of ripe for, juicy.
There's
That's
a
good
couple
word,
that
juicy.
we're following the progress of.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. All right, we'll move along quickly. Our next two agenda items are on our quarterly statistics for the enforcement and licensing programs. Handouts only. Moderator, can you open it up for brief public comment, if any? Just the opportunity.
We are once again open for public comment. Please raise those hands by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. We will call on people in the order we have requests. For our mobile device users, you have 3 different screens and only one of them has a hand button. Tap that ellipses button, the ... and find the correct screen for your hand. Looking around, I see no requests.
Okay, we'll close those agenda items and move to item number 12, public comment on items not on the agenda. And we had reserved one from earlier in the meeting to this point in time. Can you, well, first let me ask if there's anyone here on the dais, any of the advisory group members, any comments that we haven't addressed? Okay. Anyone in the room comments regarding anything that wasn't on the agenda? All right, let's go to the WebEx and we'll take care of that comment that I asked you to hold until this point in time.
So the person has let us know that they will reach out to Matt directly. Thank you very much.
Oh, my apologies. I didn't intend for that to happen, but I understand. And we'll hope to hear from them. I can't even remember what it was about, but it was about one of the presentations on the vehicle safety. I think it was vehicle safety. So if they're talking to Matt, if not, it was the ARD renewal presentation he gave. All right.
Well,
Any
look
other?
forward to fleet operations under CPUC regulations.
Say that again?
What you can look forward to is an email about fleet operations under CPUC regulations.
Okay. All right. Any other comments, moderator, for items that were not on the agenda today?
No, sir.
And that was a no?
No, there are no requests.
Okay. We will close that out. Next agenda item is an announcement of our next Bar Advisory Group meeting, which will be Thursday, April 25th, HQ2. That is not this room. That is the room across the parking lot. I think that direction, if you see to the west. So that's HQ2. That's Department of Consumer Affairs, other headquarters building. So Thursday, April 25th, 9:30 to 1 p.m. We may have a public workshop. There might be time or interest in doing something at that time on one of our several regulation packages. We'll take a look at it and determine whether that's the case or not. All right, so that's that. And we are going to adjourn. Before we do, I just want to say thank you to all the presenters, all of the advisory group members for their attendance today, both in person and on the WebEx. Really good meeting. Hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you also to the support. We couldn't do this meeting without the support of our WebEx moderator, David Bowie. You've gotten to know his voice over many meetings now. Webcaster Alex Kretescu, Zach Richardson, of course, for his support. And thank you to all the staff at the Bureau of Automotive Repair who make this meeting possible. And with that, I will adjourn today's meeting. Look forward to seeing you in April. Thank you all.
Thanks, Pat.